so many people, they get into Boas breeding and reptiles in general. They want checklists. They want like this instruction manual. They want this guide. That's not how the world works. The world works by starting with knowledge that you collect from other sources and then figuring it out for yourself. And this is the best way if you're going to breed Boas or do anything really, is just to start with that knowledge base, but then go and do it and practice and figure it out for yourself. And that's, unfortunately, I think a lot of the people these days, they don't want to figure stuff out for themselves. They want a guide. And they're always like, I need a care sheet. I need this guide. I need to know exactly what you do. I can't tell you that because number one, I don't even know. I just do it, right? Like I said, I'm just doing what I think should be done at that particular juncture. And there's no way I could record all this stuff completely.
Today's episode is brought to you in part by Cold-Blooded Caffeine, a small batch coffee company built around reptiles, conservation, and really good coffee. Founded by Trey Hall and McKendrick Dunn, Cold-Blooded Caffeine connects roasted to order coffee with real-life conservation in coffee-producing countries. 5% of every bag sold goes directly to conservation efforts, and I'm excited to announce that the Expert and the Idiot podcast now has its own custom coffee blend. Every penny from my profits from that blend will be donated to indigo conservation through the Orion Society. If you want great coffee that actually supports the animals and ecosystems we all care about, check out coldbloodedcaffeine.com. This episode is brought to you by Soul Reptile. Soul Reptile is a boutique, direct-to-consumer lighting and husbandry company focused on bringing the latest reptile physiology and lighting science into the hobby. They're the creators of the Vision LED, the most powerful UVA1 LED available for reptile lighting. They also produce precisely tuned near-infrared systems designed for specialized animals, including invertebrates. If you're serious about replicating natural sunlight and dialing in your animal's environment, Soul Reptile is pushing that science forward. Soul Reptile, the science of the sun. This episode is brought to you in part by ExoTerra. If you're as passionate about reptiles and amphibians as I am, you know that quality matters. I use ExoTerra products on all my reptile and amphibian enclosures, which is why I'm excited to be partnering with them. From naturalistic decor to innovative lighting and enclosures of all sizes, ExoTerra has everything you need for your cold-blooded companions. ExoTerra, make your reptiles feel at home. This is the Expert and the Idiot podcast. If you like the show and you'd like to support us, there's a link to our Patreon in the description below. Some benefits include getting access to new episodes up to a month in advance. There's also links to USARK and USARK Florida. If you're not already a member, please sign up. Enjoy the show. I love it when they go on that long, you know, it's a lot of fun. Dude, this is, we haven't recorded. So I went back and I looked and I was like, when were you first on by yourself? And it was episode 26.
It's like 100 episodes ago, isn't it?
Yeah.
Almost,
it's like, yeah. This is episode 124. And we're back with, man,
thank you so much for having me back. You know, I had a lot of fun the other times I was on, and I wanted also to thank you for keeping this project going and doing your podcast, because I've enjoyed listening to them a lot on my way into work. It's, you know, on my commute in, it's always something I check out and learned a lot as well. So it's thank you. And I know, you know, keeping something like this up going over the long term can be a challenge sometimes. So, you know, thanks for sticking with it.
Oh man, thanks for listening.
Mm-hmm.
It means a lot that you're a listener, and you know, I'm just trying to stay as relentless as possible and never skip a week. You know, that's kind of my goal.
Yeah, if you can do that, because I was doing I think when I started my channel, I was doing 3 videos a week and somehow stuck with that for about a year and a half. And you know how it is. You just get burned out. You run out of topics. You're doing the same thing again and again and again. It gets old. It starts to get burdensome.
You know what's kind of cool though is that if anybody were to go onto YouTube and type in Tarahumara boas, they're gonna get like probably probably 30 or 40 minutes worth of content of just you talking about Tarahumara boas.
Yeah, you know, honestly, I probably know about 5 minutes worth. I've just repeated it like 8 times. So, there's only so much you can say, Well, I mean, it is good though, because I've learned, even the last few years, every year I'm reading, I learn something new, at least, more than one thing. I learn more stuff. So it's, I'm definitely a student of the boa, and it's, always learning something new. As long as I continue to learn something new, I'll, continue to breed. It just never gets old.
Oh, I bet. And you have such a fantastic collection, and we both share a love for Argentine boas, which I really appreciate. I feel like they're sort of a underappreciated boa in the hobby, but I feel like that appreciation is actually starting to grow more and more as time goes on. They're getting more and more popular, not just as like a locality boa, but as a pet boa. People are getting them as pets, and they're pampering them and spoiling them.
And they're great pets too. And I would say about, 5 or so years ago, maybe a little bit more, is when, they really started to get popular. And I remember the first time I heard about these, I was still in high school in the late 90s or early 90s. And I had a price list. I think it may have been from Bob Clark. But anyway, he was selling them for $500 and that was like way above my budget, at the time. And I saw pictures of them, and I always thought they were, amazing looking, just beautiful, beautiful animals. And they didn't seem really that popular. And then the prices really did go down. And that's, I got my first pair in the late 90s after the price had come down. And then for about 10 years or so, it seemed like they were kind of under the radar. And then, they finally started getting popular probably like the mid to late teens, I think, like right before the pandemic. And then we all know the pandemic just, pushed reptile popularity into overdrive, and, people had extra money, extra time, and, no way to spend it. So, perfect thing is to go buy a bunch of snakes and, hop on the reptile breeding bandwagon. And, and then it's crazy how much they went up. I still think they're worth it. I think the prices have kind of stabilized, but that's another thing. Oh, yeah.
Well, I just remember researching Argentines and really wanting to get the sort of the largest, most heavy bodied Argentine I could. And there's something about their temperate range that's really interesting and appealing to me. Sort of a cold, hardy boa it's just really cool. It's just an added layer of coolness to the animal itself. That natural history is very fascinating to me. And I remember I looked into it and I'm like, oh my God, $1,800 for an Argentine, $1,500. Wow. Yeah. At that exact point in time.
Was that for the Max Pink or the T positive, or was that just a wild type?
It may have been Max Pink and maybe, Het T-Paz or whatever, but there wasn't much available. I mean, there was a very, very small handful of animals, and even it's still that way, and you look at some of these animals and you kind of question their purity, and you wonder, like, is that really an Argentine, or it looks like something else is mixed in there? And it can be hard to tell, especially when you're not familiar with the breeder. This episode is brought to you by Chewy. Most people think of Chewy for dog and cat food, but if you keep reptiles, you should absolutely be using them too. Chewy carries everything from all the brands you trust, like Exoterra, Arcadia, Zoomed, and everything in between. Live feeders to frozen rodents, enclosures, substrate, heat lamps, thermostats, water bowls, misters, and more, all in one place, shipped straight to your door. Sign up for Chewy Plus today, free for 30 days. You get free shipping, 5% rewards, and exclusive offers. I use Chewy, and you should too.
Well, interesting anecdote. I go to iNaturalist a lot. It's one of my sources of just checking out boas in the wild because obviously I can't jet off to South America on a whim. So I've checked out a lot of them, and I'm always looking at the pictures and comparing to the captive animals. Because these people that take the pictures and put them on iNaturalist, they don't have any skin in the game. They're not boa breeders. They're just, a lot of them are just hikers and they come across a boa. So it's objective. They're not going to make stuff up. And what I've noticed is overall, the vast majority of the pictures are pretty similar to the, like the American captive populations for most locality boas. But interestingly, there's always a few that are just like different, they're just like the pattern's different, or, maybe they're just not a typical example of that particular, locality or even population. A lot of it though is, the gene pools we have in the U.S. captive populations of locality boas are just a tiny drop in the bucket compared to the entire gene pool of the species over, I think over 1 million square miles, even if you just count boa constrictor, if you count if you consider them as 3 separate species, Imperator and Sigma and constrictor. So there's a huge amount of genes out there. Yeah, I mean, the captive population, I mean, I don't know exactly how many animals, but we're not talking about a huge number of animals. And maybe Warren would have a better idea, or, another boa expert, but we're probably talking for most of these localities, in some cases, just a few dozen animals. I've heard anecdotally that with Tarahumara, it might just be as few as 2 animals, at least 2 animals that legitimately came into the U.S. And then I think with the Argentines, with the advent of AI, I've been trying to use ChatGPT as a boa research tool, and I've, learned a lot from that as well. But I think I asked it about how many Argentine boas had originally been imported back. I think it ended in I think the CITES one classification was like in the early 90s. So they all are from before that, at least the legitimate imports or, I think some zoos have gotten them I think you pointed that out at our first call that we had. There are some that came in through zoos legitimately, but as far as for the hobby, I think it ended in the early 90s, but someone please correct me if I'm wrong. But, ChatGPT couldn't give me a concrete number, and they went and they checked like classifieds of reptiles. They checked like breeder sites. It did like a thorough dive, but I think it concluded that it was very few. It was like, in the probably not the single digits, but not in the triple digits. So, maybe a few dozen animals.
Yeah, I think with Argentines, my friend Sean Perry is just the biggest nerd with sort of snake history. And he actually he sent me the documents. So I'm ashamed I can't remember exactly the number, but I want to say between 20 and 40 animals were imported by Eugene Bissett to, was it Ophthalmological Services to OS? But I actually have that documentation. I'll send it to you.
That would be amazing if you could. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. He sent me the screenshots, I think, of the PDFs. He's like a encyclopedia for this kind of stuff. So yeah, I'll send that over to you. Sean Perry, his username on Instagram is Sound Serpents. He actually keeps some Argentines, so we have a similar love of Argentine boas. But he keeps a lot of short tail and blood pythons, and he's like a encyclopedia for this stuff, man. He has a book collection like you've never seen before. Really wild stuff.
Cool.
But yeah, I want to say it's around 20 to 40 animals were originally brought in, and Yeah, it's so wild. The Tarahumara is hearing that from Vin Russo.
Yeah.
And I too, like yourself, enjoy iNaturalist. And it's difficult to find Tarahumara boas on iNaturalist because they're truly a locality. They're not a species or subspecies. I mean, they're Sigma,
Yeah.
but they're a locality. So you're just kind of going around and looking at Sigma, and I guess you just need to be in the right geographic
Yeah.
range, that sort of
Yeah.
region.
And then the other issue is Tarahumara is not like a pinpoint location, like a village or town. That's an actual mountain range in northwest Mexico. So I went a few months ago. I was on there and I was looking for Tarahumaras, and I was looking just for Boa Sigma in general. And I looked around that region, and it had, I had a few, maybe 15 or 20 postings, and so I found a lot of boas that look pretty similar to Tarahumaras, not exactly. I found some other ones. There's another one. I think it's my buddy Michael Beach has some new Mexican boas. I think they're from Los Alamos, I think is the locality in Sonora. But anyway, I
Okay.
went on there. He had told me about those. I went on there and looked them up, and they look pretty similar to the Tarahumaras. Not maybe not quite as dark, and they're look a little bit bigger. But I guess the take home message is that we're talking about animals that have minor variation, and it's over a large range. So as you move away, slightly or not so slightly, a few hundred miles, you're going to get something that in many cases is pretty similar, but maybe not exactly the same, unless, of course, there's some kind of a geographic barrier, like a desert or a mountain range, or they can't connect an ocean, obviously, or a body of water where you have like the populations have been isolated, and then they go in their own separate evolutionary directions. But I think when you have a species that ranges over a very large range and the populations are somewhat interconnected, maybe you're going to have some slight variability, the farther you move away. But it's really hard to say then, because snakes move around a lot as well. They get taken up by storms on rivers, on driftwood and things like that. I mean, that's been well documented. We all know about the island boas, which have been somehow gotten to these small islands, probably thousands, tens of thousands of years ago, and gone their own separate evolutionary path, like the crow key and the cocker key. Um, yeah, there's just so much fascinating biology about boas. It's just such a great part of the herp world to be in. Um,
Yeah, I have my Patreons had kind of some topics they wanted touched on, and you bring up sort of those insular localities, and a couple of ones that came up were the Pearl Island boas and the Corn Island boas. And
mhm.
you don't work with, and even the Tarahumara too. I mean, the Tarahumara, they're on those what do they call them, the cloud forests, and
Mhm.
they're almost insulated in the fact that they're at this higher elevation where they're in sort of this perfect uh ecosystem,
Yeah,
where they're getting, it's humid, or it's more humid rather, and it's sort of a little captured area. It sounds like a really cool place to honestly like go and
yeah,
visit and herp. Like, how neat would
yeah,
that be?
definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think the cloud forest boas, there's probably pressure on them to evolve a small size because of the limited food resources. Um, Interestingly, I found these other boas, well, based on iNaturalist. I don't know how far from the Tarahumars or what the elevation of I think it's Los Alamos and Sonora, but that overall, I would say that the color and pattern are pretty similar, but they're not as dark, and they're kind of more brownish. Well, um, but this is just based on a few pictures. I can't conclusively say. Michael's told me that they're a little bit bigger than the Tarahumara. And then I've worked with the Sonoran desert boa, some of the hypo Sonorans that came through Vin Russo. I had those about 10 years ago, and these were like hypos, so they're not quite the same as They definitely look different from the Tarahumara, but obviously, like the size of the boa, the shape of the head, the shape of the body was pretty similar to the Haruhimaras. They're, a little bit bigger. So I think it's interesting that you have all of these different physical characteristics, and there's like a continuum of, size, body shape. Another thing that's fascinating to me is the ratio of the length to the width. You can think of it like the aspect ratio of a boa, if you want to use that terminology. But for example, the Pearl Island is a very slender, elongated boa, and I have my big female is about 8 feet. She's a pretty big boa, but she's nowhere
Oh,
near as thick as like an 8 foot, um, red tail or Argentine. She's quite slender, and her head is very slender and elongated, just a very striking head shape. They are a very divergent form of boa constrictor, and now I think they're technically boa imperator now, but they were originally in the genus Epicurides along with the rainbow boas when they're first
really?
described. Yeah, it was Epicurides sabogae. And then I think it was
Wow.
reclassified as boa constrictor sabogae around, the middle of the 20th century. And then um, now I guess it would be boa imperator sabogae, after the card paper from 2015 that reclassified them. So Um, I guess the point is these names, they're all man-made. The boa doesn't care what you call it. You can call it Bob, Pete, you can call it whatever, right? Fluffy, boa imperator, it's the boa. It's just not a concept that's really inherent in nature. This is a human concept. Humans came up with taxonomy and classification. And a lot of people think that there's this set science and there's discrete characteristics that definitively identify something as a species or subspecies, but that's not the case, and you have to, taxonomists have to look at a whole bunch of different tools and a whole bunch of different characteristics and make an overall judgment. You got the lumpers, you got the splitters. The splitters, of course, are the ones that see more and more species and subspecies, and the lumpers are the ones that consider everything as, one species. And like, for example, boa constrictor, some people just consider them all still boa constrictor
Mm.
imperator. There's no boa constrictor sigma. I think there was a boa sigma at one point, but then that was eliminated. And I think it came back. And then I think I've heard there's now this boa atlantica, which is like a Peruvian. So basically, I just like to look at them and identify them with the best information I have on the locality. And, I know a lot of people get really butthurt when people call something a red tail that they don't identify as a red tail, but I think it's kind of ridiculous. For example, if someone goes into a pet shop and Petco and they've got like a Colombian boa imperator, and they call it a red tail. Um, I mean, it's a trade name. It's a name to sell animals.
Yeah.
It's not a true red tail. It's not a boa constrictor. I mean, the difference is obvious. Nobody that knows anything about boas would feel differently. But if some beginner says something is a red tail boa, it's like, well, it's a boa imperator, and maybe that's not a red tail boa, or at least a true red tail, but it's not like the person did anything that's that egregious, but sometimes people get a little bit out of shape on social media, who I call the red tail police. Um, but anyway, I mean, it's all good. These are all great boas. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why there's like a certain snobbery with, some people think their boas are better than others. I just like them all, they're just all great to me.
Yeah, they really are. I mean, the diversity, it's funny. I think when people hear boa, they kind of picture a red tail or just
Mhm.
a Colombian boa. And the diversity that's available is truly incredible. I mean, there's so much to choose from. And and that goes not only across like a color spectrum, but also the size spectrum.
Yeah.
Like that you don't have to get an Argentine boa that's going to get to be 7 or 8 feet long. You don't have to go that route. You could go on the smaller side. What
Yeah.
would you say are your smallest boas? Would it be the Tarahumaras?
Yeah. So I would say of all of the boas I've ever worked with, I would have to say the Corn Island. And that was just, again, I didn't have a lot of Corn Islands. I bred them once about, I think it was in 2019. Um, and then I got out of the project, unfortunately. But that female she was like the length of my Tarahumara, maybe 4 feet, but she was much more slender.
Mm.
So I don't have a weight of her, but I would say under a kilo. I mean, this was a small animal. It was no bigger than an average corn snake, maybe not even that big. And I would say the Tarahumaras of the ones I have now, yeah, the Tarahumara, but they're a little bit girthier. Although I have some males that are 9 or 10 years old, and they're pretty slender. So I've got one male. Actually, maybe that male is a little smaller than the Corn Island. It's hard to say. But the point is they're not big animals. And I would also say that even on the other end of the spectrum, the biggest boas are not really that big either. I mean, people have this idea that they get to be 15, 16 feet. There's even, there's this erroneous report that the maximum was 18 feet, which, was shown to be a green anaconda that was misidentified. So that report is wrong. Unfortunately, people still quote that erroneous report. I think it was from like the 50s, but it's not true. We've all seen the pictures of the dudes from the 80s with their mullet haircuts and muscle shirts with their giant, stuff.
Cut off jean shorts.
Yeah. Back when, I was just a little kid, you weren't even born yet, but these guys, they got these big boas, and I don't know any of these guys. I've just seen the pictures. The boas look quite big, like plump. They're very, very plump. They've been fed a lot. That obviously has something to do with the fact that they're so big. Some of them probably, if you can believe the picture, assuming that the guy is not like 3 feet tall, the boa looks like it's, at least 10 feet. And that it could be possible if they were power fed, maybe. I don't know. I've never really power fed a boa, but yeah, and I also don't know how representative that is. If the guys just fed like 100 boas and that was the one that turned out like that. I do know there's variability in different populations of true red tails from Suriname as far as the size. Like I've got one animal, a female, who's bred for me, I think twice before, and I think she may be gravid now, but this particular female, I think she's 12 years old, and she's about 4.5 feet long. Just a small boa, and she's given birth. I think she had like 11 babies or so. So she's had these nice litters. She eats like a pig. This animal I got as a baby, and then she just didn't grow very fast at all. And I was feeding her about every 2 weeks or so. I decided to up the food a bit, and she got a little bit more plump, but didn't seem to really grow longer. So I went back. Yeah, I think it's just, it's like humans. I mean, not everybody is going to be, Shaquille O'Neal, over 7 feet tall. That's like the extreme right side of the bell curve. Yeah. And we're talking about the cases that get amplified on social media are the ones that are going to be the most extreme, that everybody sees and everybody comments on. But that's certainly not the average. And I would have to say, out of all of the boas I've ever worked with, into the hundreds, the largest I've had is been an Argentine that was about 9 feet, which was one of my first Argentines.
Yeah.
The female. Yeah. So at the time, I was probably feeding them more, because this is back when I got her in the late 90s. The norm was to feed about once a week. So I'm sure I fed her more. I don't have any detailed records. I don't even think I may not even kept records back then, because I fed her more. I thought she would breed at 2 to 3 years. I didn't know anything about breeding boas. I had the reproductive husbandry of pythons and boas.
Yeah.
By Ross and Marzek, which I still have, and I still think it's a great book and very worthwhile to get.
I need to get that book.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's out of print. and it might be very expensive.
I think last time I checked, $100 is about as cheap as you could get it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's probably worth it. I think at the time in the late 90s, I probably paid about $50. And, $50 back then is probably like $500 in today's money. So, if you actually adjust, not for the inflation that they actually say, but the real inflation rate. But don't get me
Yeah.
started on that one. Yeah, so reproductive husbandry, high tons and boas. So I wasn't successful the first couple times I put them together. And then I think, but my first litter with them was in 2005. So I think I must have got them in 97 or 98. So by then they were, 7 or 8 years old. And I think they were probably like a year or two when I got them, because at the time I didn't know like how small baby boas typically are.
Hmm.
A lot of people, they go to the pet store and they see these boas, they think they're babies, but no, they're like a year or two. They're like 3 feet or so, right?
Yeah.
So when the boas came, I had paid a little extra. Actually, I got them from Kevin, way back in the day. I didn't know it was Kevin, but I'm fairly certain it was, because I talked to him I think he said he was Kevin. I talked to him on the phone, and he described them, and there were no digital cameras, I had no way of seeing what I was getting. But he said, we have the babies, and we have some that are a little bit bigger. I think it was like 150 for the babies, and I was 175 for the little bigger ones, so I paid the extra for that. Yeah, interesting. No, I had a blood python at the time, not a red blood. It was I think a Borneo blood, like the
Sure.
yeah, the not the real dark Sumatran, but the kind of the mid-tone one. I think that's
Yeah, the Borneo.
the Borneo. Yeah, beautiful animal. And he said, yeah, I've got this one that's a real standout. It's an extra $50, and I'm like, yeah, I'll get that one. And don't get to, I didn't get to see it, but when I arrived, I was just blown away, and it was just so beautiful. But that's another interesting thing, and I'm kind of going on a tangent, because people now, they want more and more pictures, and they want like videos, and it's like, dude, come on. I mean, I
Yeah.
like giving people like the best impression of their animals and taking pictures, but I'm only one person. There's only so much I can do. And sometimes I just have to tell a person, well, maybe if I can get to it, I can get a video of its, belly, for you to check out, but I don't know if I can get to it. I mean, is that really going to be the deciding factor? If you can't make a decision based on like 30 pictures, do you really need a 31st? Um, and I know people that don't take pictures. They take like a representative picture, and then they just say, the bow will look similar to this, right? That's one thing. I know some other people have said like, oh, they all look the same, right? And I know that for some boas, the babies do kind of all look the same, but for others, they obviously don't, like some of the true red tails. There's quite a bit of variability.
Sure.
But the thing is when you're buying a boa, unless you're buying it in person, I mean, you're never going to know 100%. But like, I want my customers to be blown away. I want them to have, when they open that box, they'd exceed their expectations. And most of the boas I bought, it's been like that. When I got the boa, it's always much more beautiful in the flesh than a picture.
Oh,
And you
yeah.
can never really appreciate just the experience of holding the boa, the muscle tone, the feeling of the scales, the wrapping around your hand. I mean, it's an experience that we all, boa lovers and, python lovers and snake lovers in general, we all love that, but you can't really replicate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say not to buy animals from breeders that ship them to you, because there's not a lot available, especially with boas, even if you go to shows. But just have faith in the breeder or the seller. If you see a few pictures and they look good to you, and you can trust the seller, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to like the boa. You can never be 100% sure. Research your sellers, know what their policies are in case something goes wrong. But yeah, anyway, I
I
just went off on a total tangent.
No, I get what you're saying. I mean, I it's got to be exhausting selling animals because of the amount of animals you produce, but it has to be exhausting too because of how much you care. And I know that you understand how important your reputation is too. And
Yeah.
you personally do not need a customer that hates your guts and is going around commenting on your videos that you're a terrible breeder and you sold them X, Y, and Z. And not that you would ever do anything like that, but it is just an added layer that your reputation is probably more important to you than Joe Schmo Boa down the road, who can
Yeah.
afford to burn bridges and just move on and rip off the next guy and
Yeah.
send him mites or something, you
Yeah,
know?
no, you just hit the nail on the head. And these are things I've been kind of, struggling with increasingly like the last 5 years, because you get burned out doing this. I mean, I know there have been a lot of boa breeders that I've seen when I was first getting into it, and almost none of them are in business anymore. And they were really good breeders. They produced great animals. They had great reputations, but it can be really draining. I want to stress though that 95 to 98% of my transactions are great. The customers are great. They love the animals. They have great things to say. I've made a lot of friends with people over Boas. They've kept in touch. They've sent me updated pictures of their animals. So that's great. But there have been a few that things don't go quite as planned. A lot of times it has to do with FedEx shipping.
Mm.
And, we're as Boa breeders, or as me, because I don't go to shows and that's not something that I would think about doing. I depend on FedEx, and I think UPS is starting to ship Boas, but at this point FedEx is kind of the only thing you can go with. And FedEx has gotten more and more expensive over the years, which is, appropriate due to the inflation. But it seems like the delays have increased. There's no guarantees at all. If anything goes wrong, I basically self-insure, because there's not really a realistic way you can get insurance. I
Mm.
think I go through Reptiles Express, which is a great service that allows people without a FedEx account to ship reptiles. And, they've been great for me. But I think they have an insurance that you can buy, but then you have to like demonstrate that the customer wasn't there and that the weather was not bad. I mean, there's like a whole bunch of hoops you have to jump through, and it doesn't seem realistic. And I'll also say that in all of my shipments of probably, several hundred at this point, at least, I've only had one or two that resulted in an animal that didn't survive. I don't know why. Both cases, it was the boa arrived on time, the weather wasn't bad, the person got it right away. So in both cases, I was just had no idea. Nothing made sense. And I've talked to Reptiles Express about this to see if they had any idea, and they couldn't really tell me either. I mean, the everything is properly packaged, and I guess sometimes there's a fluke. Um,
Yeah.
so I replaced those animals, and the second shipment of the animals was fine, and the customer got them, and they were happy. But you figure that's going to happen. You do this enough, and you're gonna. Unfortunately, sometimes happens. And I think I saw one video where a person was claiming that like 1 out of 10 of their shipments results in mortality, which
What?
how are you packaging these things?
Yeah.
Maybe it was a recipient though. Maybe it was they were claiming that one of the shipments, or 1 out of 10 shipments they got was a. But that's crazy, because
That's insane.
I've probably received at least 100 or close to 100 shipments back in the day when I was growing my collection. Not a single mortality, and not a single health issue either. And I even had one dude that shipped me boas via UPS. This is crazy. I was kind of pissed when this happened, because I bought this pair of boas. They were kind of subadult boas. I think these were my actually I shouldn't say which boas they were. Anyway, they were kind of
Ooh, is it top
subadultish.
secret?
I don't want to like, just in case by some huge coincidence the person's listening.
Yeah, yeah.
They shipped the boas, and they shipped them UPS. They didn't tell me like when they were going to be shipped. They just showed up one day. and they were packaged in a Pampers diaper box. Right? And they were just, there was no padding, no foam padding. It wasn't marked reptiles. I mean, this is like illegal. Hopefully I'm not going to get busted, but I think they were in like pillowcases, just in this Pampers box. There was no, don't think it was. I think it was in the spring, but there was no heat pack or anything, which is probably good
Wow.
because heat packs actually kill more reptiles than not using
Yikes.
heat packs. So, but
Yeah.
then a lot of people were getting back to the stress of the shipping. I don't have a lot of control over FedEx, and what I can say is that it's very, very, very rare for there to be any kind of harm that comes to a boa. However, it's not rare for them to be delayed up to a day or longer. I've had a couple shipments that were delayed like 2 days. And the heat packs, they don't last. These are like 40-hour heat packs. Um, so they don't last that long, right? So people have this idea that if you're shipping a boa and the weather out, you can ship a boa if the temperatures are at least 40 Fahrenheit on both ends. And the guideline is between 40 and 70, you should use a heat pack. So that's what I do. However, it's not like the box is just left out in like 42-degree weather, the box is out in that, outdoors for just minutes. It's not outdoors for a very long time. And then it's brought into the warehouse. Um, whenever I have a delay like this, I call Reptiles Express and they talk to the FedEx and they assure me that it's being brought to the front office that's heated. So it's not that big of an issue. Um, the other thing that people don't understand is that reptiles are a lot more tolerant of cold than they are of heat. Put a boa in a temperature above around 105 degrees, it's basically fried within like 10 to 15 minutes. It's gone, right? Heat is much worse. If you put a boa at a temperature of 50 to 60 degrees, not that I'm recommending this or not that you want to do this, it's not going to die. It's just going to kind of go into a little bit of a slow down state. And then it's going to, once you heat it back up again, it should be fine, right? And not that I want this to happen, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is a good thing, but this does happen sometimes. Not common, but if you have a shipment where a boa goes out, and I think I had a shipment a few years ago that was going to, it got caught in like a nor'easter, like coming off of Lake Erie, I think, if I remember correctly.
Jeez.
And when I shipped it out on the Monday, there was the weather seemed fine, right? And I always ship early in the week, because of this. The weather seemed fine. So then it got caught in like Memphis or whatever the midpoint was, because they always go to the hub. And there was some screw up at the hub, so it didn't make the plane. And then it was caught and went to, it got stuck. I think it was like in Erie, Pennsylvania, but it was like, I think it was like 3 days. It was crazy how long this was stuck. And like I was calling them, and the customer was freaking out, understandably. And I'm trying to assure the customer, my guarantee, 100% live arrival guarantee. Make sure nothing happens. This is my thing to worry about, not yours. But sometimes these customers, they just, they're worried, and I try to assure them that I'm the one taking the risk, not them, right? And then, no, I don't want anything bad to happen to my boas. So I'm not saying that this is something it's good, but it does happen occasionally that these things get delayed, right? So the package, I think it finally arrived like it was like 3 days, I think, and so obviously the heat pack had stopped, and the person was going to pick it up and taking it outside. So of course the boa it's going to be pretty cold by the time it got home. And, I told the person just, put the boa in, warm it up, give it some water, make sure that it's got hides and it's got a comfortable enclosure, and just observe it. Right. And they did. And, yeah, I mean, within a few hours, it was back to normal. They contacted me and told me that. So,
Do you
uh,
remember what kind of boa that was?
I think it was a Quacky boa, if I
Okay.
remember correctly. But yeah, I mean, so these animals, they're out in the wild, and, um, they're in tropical areas, some of them, but some of them are kind of in a more subtropical area. I mean, Qualky, that's off the coast of Belize. I think that's technically in the tropics, but I mean, they occasionally have storms come through, and it's not like a boa in the wild has the optimal temperature of 90 88-degree hot spot, cool side of 75 to 80, which I tell everybody. A boa in the wild is subject to all kinds of fluctuations. It can't control the weather. So, but trust me, it's heat is much worse. I'm much more worried about shipping boas during the summer, and I absolutely won't ship if the temperature is above 90. And
Yeah.
even then I worry, and that's the highs, right? um and also using the heat packs, I use them, but I'm pretty sparing on them, and I'd rather not use them if I don't have to, because people have put these heat packs in the box, and they're like, well, the boa should be at 88 degrees, right? That's what it should be. So I'm going to put like 4 heat packs in there, even though it's July, and I'm going to ship it, and the boa is fried in like minutes, literally. I mean, those heat packs just give off so much heat, and there's nowhere for it to escape, so it goes right into the boa. The boa can't escape.
I had a heat pack malfunction, or something had went wrong. Essentially, I had ordered. I don't want to give, like you said before, I don't want to give anything away to kind of
Yeah.
upset this person, but I had ordered the animal, and it was in early spring that the shipping had happened. And so, there was cold temperatures at play, and that hub, what's the hub that like everything
Probably
goes
like
through? And
Memphis, either Memphis
yeah,
or Indianapolis. Yeah.
the Memphis hub. The temperatures were cold there, but it's coming to Florida where we were like 82 degrees during the day, right? And I can't remember the exact temperature. It was either 100, I think it was about 110 or 113 degrees in the box when I temp gunned it.
Jeez.
So
And
it
how was
was
the boa?
well, and this wasn't a boa. But
Oh, the python.
I opened the box, and I'm like, this is not good. I mean, this is
Yeah.
hot, and the temp, I temped the actual heat pack itself, and the heat pack was like 145 degrees or something.
Jeez.
Like
Yeah,
it's really ridiculous.
you got to always put insulation between the heat pack and the boa. You never
Yeah.
ever want that heat pack to be right up against the boa. I tape it to the top of the box securely, but then I always put wads of newspaper between that and the boa, which is inside of like a little, a boa snake sack,
Yeah.
because you never want that. Yeah, and if I have a situation where it's kind of borderline, like maybe the temps, you know, basically, if it's between 40 and 70, they recommend using a heat pack. If it's between 70 and 90, you can ship without a heat pack. But what I do is, even if it's more on the receiving end. So if the receiving end is between 70 and 90, I don't. And presumably here in Northern California, which is a very temperate climate, it's typically going to be in the 50s or 60s. I won't use a heat pack. The other
Yeah.
thing is, it's going out during the day, right? In California here, and it's not subject to that's like at night. So even if it's like 50 to 60 out, in my car, it's going to be more like 70 ish, and I always have the air conditioning on. Usually when I'm going to the FedEx, I put the air conditioning up, because there's heat packs on in the box, but I kind of makes me feel better for the snakes. I know it's kind of crazy. um, but yeah, I mean, I drop them off, and my local FedEx people, they know me, they know what's in there. They're really accommodating to me, and they always want to ask me about how my boas are doing and what I'm shipping, and they seem genuinely interested. And they tell me about like other people that have shipped reptiles, and the guy told me that there was someone had some kind of big lizard that they took out, like it had arrived, and they took it out, and they were showing all the customers at FedEx, and I don't know if it was like a monitor or something, but someone shipped it. Anyway, yeah, so I always want to err on the side of more cautious when using those heat packs. So, like, I shipped a few out a couple weeks ago, and in some cases I didn't use the heat pack because it was kind of that borderline situation. Um, I think it's one person, and I don't want to give anything away here. I think someone said that the boa was a little cold when it arrived, but then they got it warmed up. Um, but I would rather the boa be a little cold than it's going to be fried.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember reading this unfortunate story on one of the social medias that someone had shipped a reptile and thought that, oh, well, it's a reptile, it's cold blooded, it needs heat. I got to provide 85 to 90-degree heat. And I think they put 4 heat packs in one small box. And they were
That's
asking,
just torture.
and
That's
they
really
had no,
terrible.
and they were like clueless. They're like, yeah, I had heat packs. I don't know what happened to the snake. And people had asked them about, like, what was the temperature? How many heat packs did you have? And it came out that this poor animal had been fried. I don't remember, obviously. I don't know who this person is or what the animal was, and that's irrelevant. The point is, you got to be careful with those heat packs.
Yeah.
And and vent holes. You got to punch holes in the box.
Yeah.
So the
they need air and they don't need that much heat. I mean, that, it's
a good summary. Yeah.
My diamond pythons got down into the 30s this year being outside. And
you moved them out? Cool. I was
oh,
gonna
yeah.
ask you about that. Did you move them outside? How's that going?
Oh, dude, it's so cool. It's so rewarding having them out there. I moved them out last spring, so they're coming up on a year outside now, if not beyond a year. And so they went through the whole summer and just temp gunning out there and kind of getting all these sort of data points every time I go out there is just really, really interesting. Seeing, when they're out and about, which is usually first thing in the morning and all night long, is when they're out and about and cruising, and then they'll get some of that morning sun until about 10 a.m. and then you don't see them for the rest of the day because it's baking hot.
What's the temp inside their hiding place or wherever they go for shelter?
That's a good question. I actually have a probe inside of the insulated hide for my male, who's in his 5 foot by 3 foot by 5 foot tall enclosure that I built. I built a wood frame that's sitting on top of a mason cinder blocks that are have masonry work done.
Like
I had a mason.
Yeah,
I had a mason come in and put that together. It's essentially a planter box because it's open to the earth below. And I put about 8 to 10 inches of mulch in there. So there's tons of drainage. So because I never want him sitting in wet substrate, and I kind of just
the dimensions?
It's 5 feet wide, 3 feet deep, and 5 feet tall.
Okay.
And so eventually I plan on moving the females in with him. And then, eventually they're probably going to end up in like an 8x8x8 enclosure, something that I'll be able to actually walk into.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they stayed outside all winter. The only time they come in now is if the temperature goes below 40. If it goes below 40, I bring them in because I did have that close call. One of the females didn't go inside the insulated hide, and her body temperature, I temp gunned her body and she was 33 degrees.
Okay. Do you have like a heat mat in there or anything?
No heat, no supplemental heat at all. Okay. So they got cut off. Their food got cut off October 26th, and they didn't eat again until about 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Okay. So that's about what, 6 months? 5 months?
What was that? I guess we'd say 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, about 4 months. They went without food.
Okay. That's not too dissimilar to my boas, because I stop my boas. The last meal is just before Halloween, and then I start feeding again. Some of them I gave the first meal already. Some of them I haven't. So what? This is now almost April. So yeah, they're gonna get their. Actually, I gave them my first meal because I separated them. I separate my breeding pairs after the first phase, which is about 2 months or so, from between November, December into January. And then I do give them a meal when they're separated. And then I put them back together for about a month. I have that reminds me I need to go and re-separate them and give them their month. It's about once a month. And I don't. People always ask me how often I feed. I don't really have a set schedule, to be honest. It's about every 2 weeks for most animals during the growing season when it's not the breeding season. And but it varies. And with my breeding pairs, I typically feed them about once a month when they're breeding. But sometimes it's 6 weeks. Sometimes it might be a little bit less. Sometimes I'll feed a female to get her back up after she's had a litter. Sometimes I might feed her every 10 days for a couple months, basically just so they have the body shape, and then I might feed them a little bit more to get them ready for breeding. The males often will not eat, even when they're not breeding. They just go kind of, it's not uncommon for a male boa to go off feed in sometimes starting as early as November, going into January, February.
So they're
A
kind of
lot
fasting themselves.
Yeah. I think maybe, I don't know if this is just because they've been attuned in my facility to expect breeding, or if there's some kind of, inherent rhythm that's, either genetic or environmentally determined from their ancestors back in the wild. But they a lot of these males just stop eating in the, kind of the early fall,
Hmm.
maybe mid fall. Like with the Tarahumars, I was actually just checking on the pairs, and sometimes the males will stop feeding and they don't start again until around March. I've seen this a lot with some of the different Central American boas that I work with, although it's mostly island boas I work with from Central America. I don't have a lot of the Central American mainland boas. Most of the red tails, they just eat. The red tails are not, even when they're breeding, they eat. And yeah, red tails, maybe they have a more of a tendency to get overweight if you feed them too much because they don't stop eating. And maybe that's why these pictures are circulating of these massive, sausage stuffed boas from the 80s.
Yeah.
But yeah. Sorry, I went off on another tangent. What were we talking
Oh,
about?
that's
We
all
were
right.
talking about
Well,
your outdoor diamond pythons.
oh yeah, we can move
Yeah.
on from that. I mean,
No, but
with
I
the
wanted to ask you though, because um, I mean, diamond pythons, the habitat is very similar to what we have in Northern California as far as
yeah,
the climate. It's kind of like a Mediterranean climate. But I've thought about, I was inspired by your podcast where you talk about the outdoor enclosures. I've, had it in the back of my head, wouldn't that be cool to move some boas outdoors?
it would
And
be cool.
yeah, we have a chicken coop. It was my wife's project from about 10 years or so ago. And um, initially I told her, no, we don't want chickens. They're dirty. They're messy. Because I had chickens as a kid, right? But she got the chicken. She built this great coop. The chickens were these cute little chicks we raised up. And then we kind of got into like all these different breeds of chickens. They call them heritage breed. And it's
Yeah.
really cool because there's like hundreds of breeds of chickens. I mean, you can, like, we're talking about boa diversity, but chickens have an amazing diversity as well as far as the breeds. And then you get into like chicken behavior and there's like
The
something like
hierarchy,
100 different. Yeah, no, chickens are fascinating animals. And
they are.
it's sad because I eat a lot of chicken. I eat chicken almost every day, but people have this idea that chickens are not smart. No, that's not true.
Yeah.
I think we have to say that because the human species, eats 20 billion of them a year, right?
Shit.
And or maybe that's not even the case. Maybe there's 20 billion chickens alive at any given time, and some of these chickens are only lasting, a few months before they
Yeah.
go off to KFC. So, yeah, I mean, it's chickens are fascinating animals, and um, they also, the thing is that the female, when you have a group of just females, because we've never had a rooster because we're not allowed to in our area, even though people do.
Yeah.
But one female chicken will kind of assume the role of a rooster and will grow longer tail feathers, look a little bit more like a rooster, and kind of be like the alpha.
Wow.
And we originally had like 4 chickens, and then we got some more. And at the peak, we had, I think, 11 or 12 chickens because some people gave us chickens.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I got so into it, and the eggs were amazing. I mean, if you've never eaten a fresh raised chicken egg,
Oh
it's
yeah, I've
like
kept
night and
chickens.
day. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. The yolk is much richer. It's
It's
like
orange.
deep orange. Yeah, it's a deep orange. It tastes amazing.
Yeah.
And you will not want a store-bought egg after you eat, after you have your own. So what ended up happening is the chicken started dying off. We had a raccoon that got in our yard and
Uh,
got a few of them. Some of them died from, I think one might have been egg bound. So anyway, we have 3 left, right? And I've been begging my wife, I want more chickens. Let's get some cute little baby chicks, when I go to the feed store.
Meanwhile, you're the one that vetoed it in the
Yeah.
beginning.
And my wife's like, no, I'm done with that. It's dirty. I don't want to deal with it anymore. So we have just the 3. Only one of them actually lays eggs, which is it's called an Easter egger, or I think it's an Araucana breed. It lays these light blue eggs, beautiful
Mhm.
color eggs. But unfortunately, that's just the last one laying. The other 2 are, I think they're like 11 or 12 years old at this point. So I'm
Wow.
not, so once they're gone, anyway, I just went off on another tangent, but
The
once
king of
they're done,
tangents.
yeah, once they're done, my wife that wants to tear down the chicken coop, but I was thinking I could either repurpose it to breed quail, to feed to my boas, which I'm,
Sure.
I'm sure my wife would be thrilled with that, or I could put like a boa enclosure in that space, and
Yeah.
it's right up against the retaining wall. It's got like a back wall and a side wall, so I could build into that, and possibly move out maybe in Argentine, or maybe like I have these coops pastel Colombians that are really, the females like 8 feet long, would look cool out there. So anyway, it's one of the many ideas that the back of my head that I may or may not get to, but hopefully at some point.
They really thrive out there.
Mhm.
And it's crazy. Like if I don't see them in the morning and they're hiding for like 2 mornings in a row, I always know, all right, they're in shed. And that when they're in shed, they hide the whole time. And perfect sheds every single time. Never a bad shed. Every
Yeah,
single time it's a perfect shed.
for that Florida humidity, that'll do it, right?
Yeah, I'm sure it is. And where I am in Florida is about the same distance from the equator in the northern hemisphere as their native range in Australia in the southern hemisphere.
Mm.
We definitely get more rain than where they come from in Australia, but the weather is very, very similar. And even the Argentine boas where they're coming from, the Gran Chaco region in Paraguay, like
Yeah,
that area gets pretty dang cold. It gets pretty dang hot. It gets dry. It gets wet. It's got this huge range of weather that comes through. And it's funny. I was listening to your to the last episode we did, and you had this great quote that animals survive in spite of nature, not because of nature. And
yeah,
it's so true because nature is freaking brutal.
yeah,
Like it's
yeah,
brutal. That's why we live inside. That's why we're
yeah,
inside, Brian. Like if nature was this pristine paradise, we would all be outside all the time. We all love going outside. We all love the adversity of outside. We like hiking. We like the challenge. A lot of us do. And we like it because it's challenging and it's not an easy thing to go walk 5 miles through the woods. Right. And
yeah,
like that's good for our primal side. But at the end of the day, we want to be on the couch in air conditioning, you know?
yeah. No, you're right. And this is honestly, that what you just said in the last 30 seconds has been a central theme of like my brain activity for the last 30 or 40 years, to be honest, because um, we have this misunderstanding that nature is benevolent and mother nature and all that other stuff. It's not at all. And animals in the wild are living right on the edge, because if there were more resources, they would produce more animals, right? You got the prey animals, and the prey animals are going to eat and eat until they, you know, usually that's not so much if they're eating vegetables or plants, is not so much limiting their population. But if the predators are getting better and better, so the prey have to get better and better too to escape the predators. And then predators in the wild, there's um, not a lot of prey. I mean, predators in many times won't live that long. They run out of prey. I mean, like I watch all these nature documentaries, and we always see the ones with the lions are taking down the gazelle or whatever. Um, that's not easy. It's not guaranteed. You see these wild lions that are covered with scars. A lot of them end up starving. They're living in areas where there could be a drought, and they die of thirst. But nature is very, very hard. Um, they're right on the edge, because if there weren't more there were more resources, they would continue to reproduce until they're right at that line, right? So if you have animals in an environment that there are a lot of resources, they're going to reproduce. They're going to have a lot more babies that are going to survive up to a point, and then they're all basically going to be sharing the shared resources, right? So it's kind of a troubling view. And my background, of course, is in biology, and it's just it's nature is harsh. And interesting, you pointed out we like to go experience that. I feel like my day-to-day life kind of gets isolated because I spend a lot of time with my boas. I've got my day job, I've got my family, but I'm living in Marin County, California is kind of isolated, and it's a great place to live. um, but I always like to go out to different environments that kind of, I don't want to say test me, because I'm not like climbing Mount Everest or anything like that, but I go to places where I can kind of get away. Um, I recently went out to I'm a, I'm a big photographer, and in addition to the boas, I do a lot of landscape photography. And I like to go on trips to do that. And I was out in the Colorado desert, which is the part of the Sonoran Desert that's in California. And I had been to the Mojave Desert a lot, and to like California has actually three different deserts. We have the Great Basin, which is the largest North American desert. We have the Mojave, which is mostly in California, which is kind of like California's own desert with the Joshua trees. And then we got this part of the Sonoran that some people consider a separate desert called the Colorado Desert. That's not quite as distinctive, because we don't, it doesn't have like the saguaros or Joshua trees. It's kind of forgotten about, I think. And I had been there once about 20 years ago on a brief trip. This is Anza Borrego Desert State Park, which is it's about an hour and a half or so east of San Diego. Beautiful, beautiful state park. It's the second largest state park in the U.S. It's a great place to go. It's not, I found that a lot of the national parks are just unvisitable now because of all the crowds and, the Instagram effect. So this state park has very few visitors. They allow people to camp wherever. Because when I camp, I like to just sleep in the back of my SUV, right? I don't like to have to find a campsite and pitch a tent and go through all this planning. And that basically makes it impossible to camp in any national park, because you have to reserve it months ahead. You have to be surrounded by thousands of other people from LA. It's just not an experience. But Anza Borrego is a great place. It's great for herping too. They have a lot of reptiles there. I saw a few. I mean, I was primarily going for the photography, and I'm not. Whenever I go out to the wilderness looking for reptiles, I don't find them. Usually, I find them just because I'm happen across them when I'm taking pictures of something else. But anyway, when I go out there, it just part of the reason I do this is um, I get away from the social media, I get away from the technology, and I find that my body just kind of resets, because I'm able to just go with the rhythms of the sun. I'm getting up at about an hour before sun rise to go out and shoot in the best light with my camera. And then I'm photographing and exploring all day. I'm not talking to anybody other than a few people I might just, come across. So I'm just kind of having my thoughts to myself, and I'm doing this for the whole day. And then I come back to my truck and I open up a can of cold chili, eat it out of the can, and go to bed. Right? It seems like a weird way to spend a vacation, but it's I've been doing this for close to 20 years now. Um, and it's just great to just get away from everybody. Like my family understands. I have this need for space, and I have this need to reset my mind. Um, and honestly, I feel the most alive when I'm doing this kind of thing, because when I come back, I have my routine, and I love my routine. I love my Boas. I love my day job, but it's routine. And it's kind of weird. One thing that you may have noticed, and a lot of people, as we go up, as we get older, we notice this more and more, that most of the memories that really left a mark are from when we were 10 to 20 years old, right?
Mm.
And time definitely speeds up as you get older, and you make less memories. So you have to do something to make the memories, right? You have to get out of your comfort zone. You have to take a trip somewhere. You have to do something new. Because looking back at the last, you know, 20 years, obviously I remember when my kids were born. I remember when I changed jobs, things like that. But I've got years. It's like, what the hell was I doing in 2016 on January 30, or January 17th, 2016? I have no idea what the hell I was doing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a blur. And yeah, like a lot of the teens, to be honest, to me, it's just like, what the hell happened? Where the hell did the decade go? After like 2000, for me, it's like, where did all the time go?
Yeah.
You know? But like, I took two major trips back in 2025, a photo trip out to the Eastern Sierra. Um, and when my family went to Panama. And those two
Mm.
trips, they really left an impression. And this is like, I'm going to remember this till the day I die. And I'm going to be looking back. And that was such a great experience. And I'm so glad I did that. Whereas, yeah, if you're just doing your routine, I guess it doesn't imprint on your memory. And so the time doesn't really seem to have, or the time like speeds up because you don't have like these precise milestones. So it's something, as I'm getting older, once I hit 50, it's like, geez, I really have to do everything I can. I have to, whenever there's an opportunity to do something, I want to do it, because it may well be the last opportunity that I have to do it. So
I know. I
um,
know. Yeah, one of my goals is to go and see Argentine boas in the wild.
yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really want to make that happen for all the reasons you just said. It's so easy to get into a routine and literally just work your life away. And it's like when you're working, you're counting the hours down to when you're not working. And that sand is just coming out of that hourglass,
Yeah.
and it never goes back in, and you're literally wishing your life away to get
Yeah.
through another day, to get another dollar, to be able to buy more stuff, to just do it all over again. And it can be really depressing to think about sometimes, that a lot of us are just cogs in the wheel of the machine, and we just have to perform and do our job, and that's it. And there, honestly, there's people that are really passionate about about their livelihood and their jobs, and what they've devoted their life to, and I think that that's incredible. But then you see the other people that have no hobbies at all, and almost their entire life is their job, and they're not even passionate about their job.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
sad is that?
Yeah, it's very sad. And, unfortunately, some people are just, they're just working for the paycheck, and they just have to keep doing it because they need to continue to pay their rent. And we all know that financially, things have gotten much, much, much worse over the last 5 years, and the inflation and the cost of living. Um, but you bring up the point about we're cogs in the machine for like our jobs, but it's not just that. I think society has us as like cogs in the machine, because all of these social media and all of these, pop culture, movies, things that so many people in this country just do as a default. The Super Bowl, going to Disneyland, um, all of these things that, I don't even want to express my personal opinion about those things, but it's just so many people do these things and they're just the same thing that everyone else is doing. And this is facade that like somehow this represents culture and this represents, and again, I don't want to make any value judgments about some of these things, but is it really, is this just like the peak of someone's life is like going to a Super Bowl party and, watching some movie that came out that everyone else is watching? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've always, even as a kid, I was kind of quirky and I was kind of, marching to my own drum, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I kind of did what I thought was interesting, what appealed to me. And that's really, I've been doing the reptiles since I was a kid. I've been doing a lot of my other hobbies since I was a kid. And that's what has sustained me, right? It's not any of, I mean, I like my job, but, I wouldn't say it's, that's what sustains me. I'm living
Yeah.
through my interests. And as time has gone on, more and more of my resources and time and energy have gone into the reptiles as it's expanded. Um, but yeah, you're right. We're kind of expected to do these things. And so many people are just blindly doing this and, thinking that that they're somehow missing out if they're not doing all of these things that everyone else does.
Yeah.
Um,
You know what's great actually that has like I've really dropped off on social media
yeah,
aside from promoting
good
that.
idea. Yeah.
I'm not a big user of it. The only reason I have it is because of the podcast and
Hmm.
staying in touch with snake folks. Uh but outside of that, and it's kind of a blessing, and I think it's
Yeah.
its own demise is this AI slop that's showing up in droves, and it's making it so unappealing and revolting to me that
Yeah.
I am not spending a fraction of the time I used to on social media, because I go on and I see this stuff and I see the rage bait and it's trying to make me angry, and it has successfully made other people angry, and they're saying horrendous, horrible, disgusting things to each other
Yeah.
that totally lack humanity and empathy and kindness and caring. And all it's doing is pushing me further away from it. And I'm grateful.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there thinking like, good, make it all AI slot, and I'll just stay as far away as I can. And I'll put up my post for the podcast. And if somebody wants to listen, they can listen and we can stay in touch. And I appreciate the friendships and everything that I've gained from social media, but I don't need it and I don't want it. And I don't want the AI slop and I don't want to compete with that. And it's disgusting that there's no chains on that. There's nothing holding it back. And it's
Well,
fooling.
it's self-sustaining because it just gets worse and worse because this is what gets more and more clicks, right? And so the whole
Yeah.
cycle just gets, ultimately it's going to be at a point where more and more people like you are so disgusted they want nothing to do with it.
Well, and the worst part is watching the guys I work with that are in their 40s and 50 in this downward spiral of not
Yeah.
understanding what reality is anymore.
Yeah, well,
You know, they're sitting there and they're like, look at this panther's fighting a pit bull in his backyard. And I'm like, dude, that's not real, man. And he's like,
yeah,
it is. It just ran.
It's crazy what people will believe because I've seen
Yeah.
similar things that are obviously AI, and the person thinks it's real. It's
Yeah.
insane. I mean, it's bad enough when you don't know, you turn on the news and you just get all kinds of BS, right? You can't trust the news anymore. But now we got AI and it's getting better and better and more people are falling for it. Yeah, we live in a time where reality is basically created by AI and by computers.
Yeah.
It's based on what people will believe, not based on an objective reality, which is
We're in
pretty
the
scary
simulation.
thought. We are in the simulation. You're right. I've tried to get away from the whole social media, and honestly, I don't think I really ever post on Facebook much. I'm like a moderator of a bunch of boa groups,
Yeah.
That's like the only times I go to Facebook is either to get messages from people or to like, you know, let people into the BOA groups, or, I have to moderate the posts. People are posting hundreds and hundreds of pictures, and, you can never keep up. I think there's like 5 moderators, but there's always like hundreds of posts every time I go there that need to be let in. And anyway, so that's like the only time I go to Facebook. YouTube, I don't really watch a whole lot of YouTube other than a few things, like I watch your podcast. I watch a few other YouTubers on various topics. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's like it gets to be not necessarily. I mean, social media has damaging effects on people's mental development. There's no question about that. But even
Yeah.
besides the active damage, the fact that you're being drawn away from doing better things, this is what really gets me. Because when the pandemic started and I was working at home, I started watching YouTube like every night. Like I would do it. I'd like maybe watch an hour of TV, and then I watch, see what looked interesting on YouTube. And I would like, it was like a ritual that would like help me fall asleep. And the more and more the time has gone on, the more and more I'm thinking, yeah, I don't really get much of anything out of doing this, right? It's just taking away from other things, and it's reducing my attention span. And now there's not even like, you go to YouTube, you watch 5 videos, you get like a minute or two into each, and then you just click something else, right? It's like, what
Yeah.
the hell is the point? And I know how stupid it is, but it's just become like this behavior that's been ingrained. And I
Well,
don't
you
really,
you can't help it, right? Because you're like watching the video and the first 2 or 3 minutes are super interesting, and then it starts to wind down,
yeah.
and then you see the thumbnail of another video beneath it, and you're like, "Ah, I want to see that,
Well,
and then you
yeah,
just
that's part of it. That's part of it. But the more worrisome thing is that you think the video is going to be about something that looks interesting and they've got like good things to say, and then when you get 2 or 3 minutes in, you realize the person is not saying anything, and they're
yeah,
just this is just hopefully that's not happening with my videos, but I realize it probably is for some people, but the person is just blathering on and on like an idiot with no point, right? So
yeah,
you go somewhere else and you repeat the cycle 4 or 5 times. You wasted an hour and you got
yep,
nothing to show for it. And I used to read a lot, right? In my 20s and 30s, I would read a lot of stuff, literature. I'd read a lot of nonfiction, obviously stuff on Boas and science. I really stopped reading about the time where the social media was starting up. And
yeah,
I'm getting back into the reading now, but reading is a much more active process, and there's not this instant, like, I mean, some people call it a dopamine hit, whatever the hell's going on in our brains when we watch social media. You have to really invest the concentration, right? Because some books are just, there's no reward until you get like 50 or 100 pages in, and it's a very it's not a passive process. You have to actively be thinking and listen, reading the book, but you get a lot more out of it, right? Because it engages a lot more of your brain, and you get so
yeah.
much more information, right? So I definitely I'm getting back into that when I have the time. But yeah,
There's
you're right.
so many good snake books out there.
Yeah.
And I own so many good snake books, and I haven't read any of them. I can't read,
Oh, really?
Brian. I can't read. Yeah, I mean,
Is it
I
like an attention thing, or is it just
yeah. I
because some
used to
snake
read. I
books?
used to I used to
Yeah.
go I used to get in bed an hour before I wanted to go to bed and read. And I used to read so many books. Especially on snakes and reptiles, and now I just totally lack the concentration, and it's so difficult to not get in bed and scroll and then go, "Oh shit, I was supposed to be asleep 30 minutes ago," and then
Yeah.
go to sleep, you
And
know?
it's robbing your sleep. It's also, I think there have been studies done that show that watching this content is not really conducive to a restful sleep. At least,
Yeah.
obviously not the rage bait, clickbait type. So we're not doing ourselves any favors for our mental health. I gotta just cut the cord. I gotta just stop,
Yeah.
because it's just not worth it. It's a waste of time. It's having a negative impact. Even if it's not actively damaging your brain, it's taking away from other things that you could be doing that you're going to get a lot more out of.
Well, and that's why I love doing this so much is because, we're two humans talking to each other right now and not being influenced by anything going on around us or any technology right now, which is a
Yeah,
really,
it's like 100% focus. I'm not, I
yeah,
got my door locked. I told my family, leave me the fuck alone for the next 2 hours or so, 3 hours, however long this takes.
leave me the
Um,
fuck alone, family.
yeah, I try to keep my content family friendly, no F words. Um,
That's hilarious.
and sometimes it just slips out. Anyway,
Brian, what
yeah, no,
happened?
focus. It's focus. And actually, this is the exact reason why I go off to the middle of nowhere in the desert by myself with my camera, because it's
Yeah,
100%. When I'm in the zone, when the light is perfect, and you enter a Zen state. It's the flow state. You're
yeah,
just me and the camera become like one. It's like the ideas are going from my head into the camera, being captured on the LCD screen. It's just like this when it's working. It's just this amazing experience when you're in the flow state. And I used to be heavily into music, and I minored in jazz guitar and in college, and for a while I was really into jazz guitar and jazz improvisation. And the few times I was in a setting where I got that, I was just in the flow state, like the music was coming from my head through my hand into the guitar, and
mm,
it's just this amazing experience. I mean, you just can't beat that, right?
mm.
But just the concentration, but just to have a conversation with you where I have your 100% undivided attention. I'm giving you 100% undivided attention. This is rare these days, and it's something that we really have to appreciate.
Yeah, and just kind of thinking about that, how we don't want nature, but we need it,
Yeah,
and we
yeah.
kind of, yeah, we need it for that reset, and we need to feel the sun, and we need the difficulty, and we need all that stuff, and I think that our snakes are probably the same way. And even like taking them out and letting them cruise around and feel the sun for a little bit, and just get some of that pure unfiltered sun and be able to cruise around and smell the leaves. And I
Hmm.
mean, I had my
The fresh
Argentine
air,
boa.
yeah.
Yeah, I had my Argentine boa with me outside, and I'm just sitting there and I'm talking to my friend Paul on the phone, and this dove lands 3 feet in front of her.
Oh wow.
And she's like, holy shit, I'm gonna eat. And the dove is just like oblivious, and like understands that she's a living thing, but has no perception of the threat. And yeah, I was just gonna let nature do its thing, for better or worse. But she ended up, kind of creeping up to it a little bit more, and the bird took off. Uh,
Okay.
but like, could you imagine how enriching that must have been for her? Like
Yeah,
that.
just to experience something other than being in an enclosure. I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and
interesting because I take my boas out to the backyard to photograph them, and we have the chickens out there, and sometimes they seem to be going towards the chicken coop, so they must be
sure.
getting that chicken smell. Um, but yeah, but that's probably enriching. I mean, it gives them something different. Same thing with
Yeah.
food. I mean, a lot of people they're just feeding rats, and it's like no, you mix it up a bit. Feed them some quail, feed them some rabbits. Um,
Mm,
I mean, it's got to get old just eating rats, you know. And of
yeah.
course, in the wild, they eat so much more than just one thing. They just
Oh yeah.
whatever they can get.
This whole feeding thing that we had started to talk about. So you feed your adults like once a month, because my Argentine girl, I've been feeding her. She's only eaten like twice. She had the
Your
whole winter
Argentines,
off.
what, like 4 years old?
I think she's a 21, so she's coming up on 5 years old. She's
Okay.
about 6.5 feet, and I think she's about 12 pounds and change,
Hmm.
probably between 12, 13 pounds now.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
I would.
so I've been feeding her every 3 weeks, and she seems to
Yeah,
be
that's
chunking
about
up pretty good. And I'm
okay.
like,
May
maybe I
want to
should
back
gap.
off a bit. Yeah, I mean, it
Yeah,
depends. You don't want them to chunk up too much. When they're preparing for breeding, they can get a little chunky because they're going to go without food for a while. Um, I think like if I'm preparing a female for breeding, especially if she's just had a litter, I'm going to be giving, I'll go to every other week feeding. But then, I feed breed the females only every other year. So if they've just had a litter, they're going to get fed. So say a boa has a litter like in July, it's going to get fed heavily for out to November or end of October. So it's going to get fed a little bit more heavily for about 3 months or so. Then it's going to enter the cooling again in the midwinter or the winter fast. And even boas that don't breed are going to be fasted for about 2.5 months or so. But the ones that don't breed, they go back to usually ramp it up in the spring a little bit slower, about maybe every 3 weeks or so. And then if they're breeding, they're going to be fed, about once a month or so, maybe once every 5 weeks. Once I remove them from the preparing, feed them, and then I put them back together a week later. But it all varies. I mean, some babies I'll feed a little more often. I'll feed them every 10 days or so. For some of like the reptiles, it's only 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, because they're a little more sensitive to overfeeding. Yeah. But some of the morph boas, some of the Colombian boas, they can feed more often, and they seem to want to as well. I see it seems like with my morph boas, if I don't feed them like every 10 days, they start to get a little skinny. So I'm wondering if they've just been, some of these animals have been in captivity for many, many generations. At this point, there's been a lot of selection that's been going on, both the selection of the breeder for the traits they want, like the albino or morphs, or even just, traits like color and size and temperament. But then there's also the captivity is shaping them in many, many ways, because all of boas that came from the wild, there's a subset that were just happen to be better primed to do well in captivity. And those are the ones that invariably are going to pass on their genes generation after generation. So that's, you have multiple different ways that captivity is changing boas. And I think we talked about this in our first podcast. Boas at this point, I consider a lot of them as domestic animals because they've been changed so much. I don't know necessarily. Well, some of them certainly would not be able to survive in the wild, like many of the morphs. I mean, like an albino boa. But I don't even know. I mean, would they have the same feeding response in the wild? Would they be able to, hunt as effectively as a wild boa? I don't know the answer to that. I know that most boas, in fact, virtually all boas, still have a very fast feeding response, and they always want to eat. I have some boas that they just take the rat and they just hold it in their mouth for a few minutes. They don't bother constricting it. It's not clear whether they know that they don't need to constrict it because it's dead, or because they've just lost the urge to constrict. And obviously, if they don't have the urge to constrict in the wild, that's going to be a big problem. So I don't know the answers to those questions, but it's interesting to think about.
I want to circle back to you getting the animal from Kevin, because you didn't finish that story. So we got into the people asking for more pictures. So this was back in, did you say this was the early 2000s?
No, late. I was in grad school. It was the late 90s.
So this was the late 90s.
Yeah.
And
I think like 98.
Wow. I was 8 years old.
Yeah, I was I? I don't want to. Well, you know my age by now. I think I was in probably 24, 25, 26. Okay. Maybe. But 98. Yeah, I was 24 or 25 in 98.
Okay.
And I'd come into a little bit of I was a starving grad student with, all of these ambitions to be a snake keeper. I had snakes at the time. I had a few. But, obviously when you don't have much money, you can't afford having snakes. And I had come into a little bit of money, and I think I had either their website. Yeah, they had a website in 98, right? Yeah. Or like a price list or something. And I remember just like looking it over and like, yeah, I want, maybe I can get some, like the red tails they had at the time were probably 300 or 400. That was above my budget at the time, but there were quite a few animals that were in like the $150 to $200 range, including I did some blood pythons and some Argentine boas. And so I think I just called him up. I called up Nerd and I told him, yeah, I want to get some Argentines. And it looks like you got some. He told me they had like a couple different either litters or sources available. I don't know if he bred them. I don't. I should have asked him. This is like over 30 years ago.
Yeah.
No, it's about 30. Yeah. So this is like, this is off the top of my head. I didn't keep any concise records, obviously. They had the babies and they had ones that were a little bit bigger. And then the conversation about the Borneo blood. And he told me, yeah, he's got this one male that's just off the charts, that's a little bit extra. And I told him, yeah, I'll take that one. But I know I didn't see any pictures, no way to see. And at the time, I had to go to the airport because it was shipped by air freight. That wasn't FedExed. And I think FedEx was shipping stuff at the time because I went through a tortoise phase and I bought a pair of sulcata tortoises. This is when I was in college in like the mid 90s, and they came by FedEx. And that was another thing. Like I had no picture. I just had this price list from I think it was called the Central Florida Reptile Farm. I think I may still have the price list actually. Anyway, back in the day, like there was no web, there were websites, but they typically didn't have like inventories where you could look at the actual animals. And a lot of people were just sending out paper price lists. So, I'd call up the guy, tell him, yeah, I want to get this animal. I may have even used my mother's credit card because I didn't even have a credit card at the time.
Wow.
Maybe I sent a check or I don't. But anyway, he's like, yeah, the tortoises will come next week. And I don't think he even told me when. And I was at home and the FedEx showed up and they're in the FedEx box. And I'm like, whoa, this is cool. You can get, reptiles shipped to you in the mail. It was like a novel thing. So yeah, with the nerd animals, they just arrived, and you either were happy or you weren't. And I was always really happy because I'm a reptile guy and I like almost all reptiles. So if somebody who's an established person has these really nice ones and they're telling me on the phone that this is like a pick of the litter type animal, I'm probably going to be blown away by it.
Yeah.
And typically, I'm not actively buying anything. Like I got my Sri Lankan pythons a few years ago, and then I think the last boa I got was around 2020, other than my holdbacks. But usually I've been able to see pictures, and usually the boas look like the picture or better. There have been several times where I didn't see pictures, and that tended to be from people who were more established. And we're just, these people are busier in general, so they don't necessarily have the time to take pictures of all of them. They have their reputations, so you probably can maybe trust them a little bit more. But yeah, whenever I didn't see the picture, I was really happy with the animals. So
yeah,
I thought, well, maybe I should stop doing this because it takes me many, many, many hours to photograph all these babies.
sure.
If I have a litter of 15 babies, I wait till after they shed. So they shed at about 10 days, and usually I'll feed them once or twice, and then I got to do the photos. But I got to take each one. I got like this setup with this photo studio it's pretty cool, because I got it down to a science where I can just put them in, and most people know I take photos resting on top of these smooth river pebbles because the boas seem to like resting on there, and it's kind of a nice background that's not too busy, and the boas stand out well against it. But I bring each animal in, I take a few pictures, and then I bring it back, and then I, repeat the process. Sometimes the boas don't cooperate though. Sometimes they do not sit still.
Mm.
And you can't get the boa to sit still, and um, sometimes it can take 20 minutes to photograph one boa because they're not sitting still,
Jeez.
and you're trying to make it sit still. There's a few tricks you can use. Sometimes you just get crappy photos. The boa didn't sit still, so it's blurry, Um, and sometimes some boas are just, they happen to be more photogenic that day. Maybe they just shed, or maybe they're just looking nice that day. And some of the pictures invariably look better than other pictures, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the boa is a better boa or it's a nicer boa. You know, it's just, it took a better picture. We all know that sometimes you can have a picture taken and it looks like crap. You want to have your
Yeah.
picture retaken just for whatever reason. So I tell people that, make sure that you're picking an animal not based on the quality of the picture, but the quality of the boa, right? And I try to get it down to a science so all of the pictures are comparable, since I take them all the same way, but it just doesn't work out like that. Sometimes they're opaque, like I have a litter I'm photographing, and two of them are in shed, so they're not going to look as good, right? But what do you
Yeah.
do? Do you wait till they shed and retake the picture? Do you just take it? Because when you have, 10 or 15 litters you got to get through, there's only so much you can do. So,
So you must lose your mind when people say, "Hey, can I get some more pictures of this animal?"
well, I probably honestly, I usually I try to accommodate everybody, and I thought to myself I should push back more because this is taking a very inordinate amount of time, and invariably the people that want more pictures, a lot of them they don't end up getting a boa anyway. They're just, I
Yeah.
don't know if they're just getting information out of me, or they're just have nothing better to do. Um, I know a lot of people that are repeat customers, people that I mean, names you definitely recognize on the BOA forums. People that are a lot of them are starting to breed. Some of them are more well known than others. But these are people that really know their stuff. They never ever ask for pictures, ever.
Yeah.
They contact me. They say, "I want that BOA." They know 100% what they want. I don't have to answer any questions. A lot of them have watched my videos where I've already answered the questions anyway. And they've all, these people have done their homework. They've read all the books. They know exactly what they're doing. And these are ideal people to deal with. Um, I also, you get a lot of beginners, and a lot of the beginners are really great to deal with too, because they ask the right questions. You can really tell certain people are just really thinking this through, and they know what they need to learn, and they're not trying to hide anything. So those are great customers too. I
They
thought,
probably watched a lot of your videos too, so they
yeah,
already kind of feel
that's
like they have a
part of it.
relationship with you, you know?
Yeah, that's part of it. Actually, I thought about making a video about like the different types of BOA customers, but I thought maybe that might be a little tasteless. Anyway, um, there's some that are like very like one word. Like you get these one word emails like "How much BOA?" You know,
Yeah.
it's like this is some people just don't know how to write emails, and I don't know if it's because they don't have social skills or because they're just, I don't know. I mean, I'm like old school, and like I remember like in elementary school and being told how to write a letter, like the
Yeah.
right format and the right salutation and all that stuff. So I try to keep that touch with my emails, but some people are just like, they're writing like an email that's like one sentence, no punctuation. That's another thing that kills me. No punctuation. They've like this sentence. It's not even a sentence. It goes on for like 10 lines, just like fonts, no commas, no capitalization. And I gotta like read through it and be like, what the hell is this person trying to ask, right? So that's a little annoying. But these are not the majority of people, by the way. Um, so yeah, some people are just really blunt to the point. Um, but then you got your type that they just want more and more information, and they're just
Yeah.
asking question after question and things I've already talked about, right? And I always refer them to my videos because that was the point of the videos, was to answer people's questions. And more pictures, videos. They want pictures of me holding it. They want like, at some point you got to just say no. That's it, right?
Yeah.
Um,
You know, Tarahumara boas are hard because they vary so widely. And I'm assuming that they probably fire up and fire down the way a lot of boas do.
mhm.
And it makes me like anytime I've looked at your Tarahumara boas, I'm like, boy, I'd really like a pair of these. And then I'm like, I end up looking and I'm like, I don't know what the hell to pick. That's one that if I ever get a pair, I would almost want to just say, Brian, I defer to you. Pick me out the nicest pair that you have available
No,
right
I
now.
love when people say that because I can not only pick out the nicest looking, but sometimes I'll have boas that are just a little bit healthier. Like some of the red tails, maybe they're a little, sometimes they have digestive issues or they're not quite growing as well as some of the others. And I always want to give somebody the boa that they're going to have the best shot at having a 100% success with. So if somebody says that, I love when people say that, right?
Yeah.
But and sometimes people do say that, but it's not that common, unfortunately. But as far as the Tarahumaras, I would say overall the variability is mostly the colors do get darker and lighter. I would say the pattern doesn't really vary that much, and it's more like the colors can get a little darker or lighter in the same animal, so it's not really between animals.
Mm.
But I think what happened, actually, this is with my Tarahumaras that were born in 2025. I had 2 litters. And what I did is I photographed 1 litter against the darker river pebbles, which is my default. But then I have these lighter pebbles as well. And sometimes I think, well, maybe the darker boas look good against the lighter, right? So I photographed the other ones against the lighter ones. And that was a big mistake because what had happened was that the settings in the camera responded to
Yep.
the darkness or lightness of the background and adjusted slightly the color of the boa. So people will be like, "Well, you got your one light litter and your one dark litter," and I have to tell them, "No, this is because of the pebbles, and also because of our eye. When you see something against light
Yeah.
background, it's going to look different than it is against the dark." So that was my mistake, and I'm not going
You
to do
really
that
blew
again.
that one,
I
Brian. You really
really,
blew it.
I really effed it up. Yeah, I blew that one. So I'm not going to do that again. They'll all be against the same pebbles, so we'll all
I
have the
did
same.
think that. I was like, boy, he had
Yeah,
one really light litter and one really dark
yeah.
litter.
It's
That's
crazy
interesting.
how that works. And like I said, you learn something new every year, and you don't make the same mistake
Yeah.
again.
It's why I always wear black shirts when I record, because if I
Yeah,
wear a light shirt, everything, my skin, like the shadows are more harsh, my skin is darker,
yeah,
the cages are darker, everything's darker.
yeah,
Uh so yeah, it's so if I wear a black shirt though, it kind of makes everything look more uniform.
yeah. No, that I actually tried on 2 other shirts before this, and like with my videos, I tend to just wear solid dark t-shirts. I
Yeah.
tend not to wear anything with logos or any kind of graphic because maybe it's a little more distracting. But I always I try to wear like reptile t-shirts for for podcasts. But yeah,
Sure.
I had one shirt that has a lizard on it from some national monument, but it was like a light shirt and it just didn't look good. And I had a few. I have some t-shirts that I make for my channel, and I
Dude, I
have.
need to get one because
Oh
I
yeah,
would
okay.
totally
I got to make
I
more. Usually when you make the shirts, like for the first week or two, you sell a bunch, and then it just kind of gets forgotten.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but anyway, I had some prototypes that weren't. They're not the ones that are up there now. In fact, I don't think they were up there ever because I went through a stage where I was making the shirts, and I would get a prototype, and I'd look at it and make adjustments. So I put on one of the prototypes I had, and I'm like, no, this doesn't look good because it's a prototype, right? It doesn't look like how I want it. And then it's like I want, yeah, like you said, just solid black. I mean, it's less
Yeah.
distracting, and you stand out better. But yeah, with the snakes, it's the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I can imagine.
But
Boy,
like
yeah,
with an
people
IMG, with an Argentine or an IMG boa, it might not look so good against the dark background because you can't see it, right? So you want like a light background. But then the
Yeah.
light background might make it look artificially darker. So,
All right. I got a topic for you that I really want to get to.
okay.
Lisa Farina in
Oh,
my Patreon.
uh-huh.
Uh Great lady.
Yeah,
Everybody loves Lisa.
she's great. Yeah.
Uh she's been kind of fixated on this topic. It's been a topic on the Discord. Uh Selecting holdbacks. How do you do it?
Mhm. Well,
How
I
do you
should have,
select
good topic. This could be like a whole episode. Um,
Yeah, how do you select your holdbacks? Do you keep them all and let them grow a little bit and then make your choice? And then how many times have you let the how many times have you had the one that got away where
mhm.
then you see a picture of it maybe from the person who has it now a couple of years down the road and you're like, damn, I should have kept that one.
Uh, so there's actually quite a few answers to that question from my own personal experience that I've done. And at this point, unfortunately, I've got to the point where I really can't keep any holdbacks. And I really have to limit myself just because of resources and space. If we go back to when I was first having litters, I would just hold back. Like if there was an animal that just really stood out, I would definitely want to hold that one. Sometimes you have a litter and there's just this one animal that, for whatever reason, is just really the clear standout.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so I'd hold that back, and then I for some litters I held back like a male and two females, or a male and a female. Like you had picked like the nicest pair. That was another. Some of my litters I didn't hold back any, and this was primarily for animals. Like when I first got into this, I had this idea that I was going to focus mostly on the true red tails, and I think I had up to 5 different types at one point before focusing down. But I had this idea, and so I'm going to hold those back, and then other types I'm not going to hold back as much. So I ended up not holding back like some of the dwarf boas and like the Corn Islands, for example, which I should have held back. I didn't. Um, and then I kind of got, after a few years, I got more into some of the other boas, and some of the I don't want to say shortcomings, but some of the challenges of red tails became apparent. And I really, some of these other types of boas I just really, really loved, and I started holding those back. Um, and then I started doing the morphs, and there were certain morphs that were just so rare, or so you never see them. And one of the great things with getting into morph boas is if there's a morph that's just way out of your price range, you can always get hets and make it that way, or you can always,
Hmm.
there's ways of making it, I hate it when people say make breeding animals that would not be available to you otherwise. But what ended up happening at that point was, um, like with the true red tails, I'm by far the most successful with the Surinames. I've had some success with Peruvians and with Venezuelans, and never was successful with the North Brazilians, unfortunately. Um, so I did get out of certain projects, right, and focus. But because of the Surinames, I had so many nice Surinames. And for a few years, I was just holding back like the nicest pair from every litter. So I had like a couple dozen holdbacks, right? And then, there's only so many that you can keep. And then you end up raising them up, and then you get attached to them. I have let go quite a few, and I recently put up for sale Suriname holdbacks born between 2020 and 2024. Some of
Wow.
them have sold, some of them are still available. But the other way that I get holdbacks is that I have a boa that was originally up for sale and no one buys it, and it gets nicer and nicer, and I like it more and more. And then I'm like, no, I can't let this go. This boa is just, killer. And that actually happened. This interesting story. I had an IMG Moonglow litter in 2024, great litter, and I hope to repeat this year. And I was going to hold back. Like I had a Moonglow IMG and a Ghost IMG and an Anery IMG. Those were going to be my 3 holdbacks. And there was one animal that was just straight IMG, They're all, double het, call, and anery. And this animal was up for sale, just an IMG. And, I say just because this animal was spectacular in its development, and it just started getting so dark, right? And just such a beautiful animal. And she didn't sell. I think she was probably up for sale for 3 or 4 months. And then I'm like, no, I can't sell this animal. And maybe part of it was because I didn't take an updated picture. It was like the picture, she was only like, a month old, and she hadn't started darkening that much. And I think with the IMGs, I think I'm gonna, hopefully I'll have some IMGs this year. I think I'm just gonna hold them for a month or two because it's so hard. I mean, sometimes you can't even tell for sure it's an IMG, and sometimes they, like you said, they do really develop. But anyway, this animal just became like, I got to keep this animal, right? And then I actually had her for about a year, and she was just getting darker and darker. And she was a little bit ornery to handle,
Yeah.
but not too bad. Like I was, taming her down. Like 99% or 95% of my boas, I'd say, are just like puppy dogs. Not like, they're not like completely mellow, but they're not going to bite. The only way you could get bitten is if you smell like a rat. But this
Yeah.
particular one was a little bit defensive, but she was calming down. And I last fall, lying awake in bed trying to fall asleep, I invariably will have. I'm thinking about the boas and the direction of my breeding, the direction of my boa operation, and I'm just like, yeah, I just got to get rid of some of these holdbacks. I just don't have the space. I just can't keep these many animals. And unfortunately, you sometimes have to have these checklists like, well, these are the ones that are at the top, and these ones, even though I definitely want to keep them, they're a little bit below that. And unfortunately, with this particular female, she was a little bit below because I already had a ghost and an anery IMG and a moonglow IMG. So I put her up for sale, and yeah, no, she sold real quick. But yeah, I mean, so that particular animal was she wasn't a holdback, then she was, and then unfortunately she wasn't. But no, I'm happy because the person who got her really wanted a nice dark IMG, and I don't have any doubts that these boas are going to really good homes, and that people are going to continue to pass on the legacy of the boas, and some of them will breed them, and some of them will just keep them as pets, and it's all good. So yeah,
How can we? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I directly answer your question, but yeah, I mean, with me, I suppose if like I had unlimited resources, I would just keep half of them, but that's obviously not a thing you can do, So this year I'm really going to have to limit myself because there's a certain capacity of time and money and space that you have that you just, I think that's what limits people who are boa breeders. And, unless, some breeders are going to go and they're going to get another facility and they're going to hire people. Yeah, I never had any thought of going down that route. It's just not what I want to do.
Yeah. So what is it? Just a gut feeling? Is it just like you just
Well,
go through and
sometimes
you're like,
sometimes when you see it, it's
yeah,
more of a gut feeling, when you see something and it blows you away, you're blown away, like it's no different from if you eat you have a food, you eat some food and it's just amazing, or you have any kind of experience that's just so amazing, that's just so above what the norm is. You just emotionally drawn to the animal. I mean, for me, I'm more of an emotional person, to be honest. And even though I'm trained as a scientist, a lot of science is not rational. It's not like this objective. There's a lot more emotions and creativity, and I guess that would be the left side of our brain, for lack of a better word. Then you
how
would think.
so? Can you like define that more? Like how
Yeah,
so?
I mean, even like there's been a lot of scientific discoveries that have been inspired by something completely unrelated. Like I think like even in dreams. Like I'm interested in dreams, and I've been fascinated by like dreams and that kind of thing, what they mean. But I think that the benzene ring, which is a very common structure in like organic chemistry and organic chemicals, the person who came up with that, I guess they dreamed about it at night, and they, if I remember correctly, the story goes that they had this vision of monkeys that were running around in a circle, and they ran
Mm.
around so fast that it became like this blur, and it became like this continuous circle of like, I don't know if I'm getting the story wrong, but anyway, that's the benzene ring is kind of weird because it's got 6 carbons and it's got double bonds alternating with single bonds, right? And it's a very common structure, but apparently, so I'm not a chemist, and organic chemistry was not one of my strong classes as an undergrad. I made it through, but not with flying honors. But the electrons within the benzene ring, like you think about like bonds in between two atoms, that the electrons are being shared, like a covalent bond. But apparently, it's there's something weird because it's not like a true double bond and single bond, right? It's like the electrons are shared equally among the whole 6 carbon. It's just something bizarre that's not completely intuitive. I mean, I'm not a chemist, so it's not completely intuitive to me. And when my professor explained it, it didn't really make 100% sense. But this person apparently just devised this in some kind of dream they had, right? Which is
Wow.
weird, or like even like Einstein with relativity, like how he came up with that. There's no way you could come up with that just by like going to a lab and doing a few experiments. It's like way beyond that,
Yeah,
you know?
Einstein walked a lot, which is really interesting. I think he worked like 2 or 3 hours a day of actual work,
Yeah.
and the rest of the time he was just walking. He would go out
Yeah.
on
Walking and thinking.
walks. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it gets like, a lot of it is just more intuitive, and it's not like this checklist. So many people, they get into boas breeding and reptiles in general, they want checklists, they want like this instruction manual, they want this guide. That's not how the world works. The world works by starting with knowledge that you collect from other sources and then figuring it out for yourself. And this is the best way, if you're going to breed boas or do anything really, is just to start with that knowledge base, but then go and do it and practice and figure it out for yourself. And that's, unfortunately, I think a lot of the people these days, they don't want to figure stuff out for themselves. They want a guide, and they're always like, I need a care sheet. I need this guide. I need to know exactly what you do. I can't tell you that because, number one, I don't even know. I just do it, right? Like I said, I'm just doing what I think should be done at that particular juncture.
yeah.
And there's no way I could record all this stuff completely. I know about what my procedures are, but the other thing that people are missing, this works for me in my situation. It's not going to work for you necessarily in your situation. So
Mm.
you should take like what I am telling you to start with, but then you should go with it, right? And figure it out for yourself, That's just, I
Yeah.
mean, that's like anything. It's not just boa breeding.
So tell me more about the emotions behind picking a holdback.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's just like sometimes you just have the animal that's just the standout, and it's just got like the most perfect pattern or the most perfect color, um, or even its behavior. Sometimes maybe it's you like that it just seems a little bit more sentient than the others. It's kind of weird to think about, but sometimes a boa will just seem like maybe it's smarter. I don't know. It just seems like it's got more awareness of what's going on. And I mean, you wonder about, certainly animals, reptiles are being shaped for their behaviors as time goes on in captivity because people are selecting the most docile ones to move forward. People are selecting the ones that are going to, eat the best, so yeah, it's behaviorally that can be part of it as well. But
That's so interesting. And there has to be more, there has to be smarter boas than other boas
you would
because
think so.
Yeah,
And
that's how we are, right? There's Einstein and then there's me, so
I
like,
think so, but um, and then I guess the question about is one type of boa smarter than others? I think I may have made a video on that where I tried to. I'm trying to remember what I said. Where I tried to speculate that one boa. I don't. Yeah, I don't know if there is. I know that certain snakes. Like I'll tell you right off that certain pythons are really really smart.
hmm.
I know like my Sri Lankan pythons, I've really just kept Burmese, blood, and Sri Lankan and carpet. Those are my pythons I've kept. But the Sri Lankans, they just seem like they're really aware of me. They watch me through the cage. Um, I would say that they're probably sharper than most of my boas. I know I don't want to let down boa people. Boas, I think, are
You are
probably,
boa people.
and I've heard that retics are really smart as well. I've never kept a retic,
Yeah.
but I've heard that they're, among the smartest snakes. Um, the fact that they're also unpredictable and they're among the largest snakes, I don't have the resources for a retic. Like I thought it'd be cool to have one, but I've never done that. And I've also heard that cobras are really, really smart as well.
Oh yeah.
So yeah,
I have indigos.
oh, yeah,
I kind of went into
interesting.
getting them thinking like, oh, these are going to be a really high functioning snake. Uh, and I think that they are, but they're also very derpy and just,
Oh,
like once food is involved, it's like all that mental faculty is just out the window and they're just, I need this mouse, and grabbing it and beating it on the side of the tub and backing out of their tub. And, it's a mess. Uh, but they are super cool. And I've seen people get those little, the dog treat puzzles where the dog has to nose
oh
the
yeah,
piece
yeah.
around until they can
Mhm.
open it up. People have put little like medium sized mice inside of those for indigos to be able to slide the pieces around to get the mouse out. And it's very entertaining to watch.
Did they actually
So
get it out?
yes. Yep.
Cool. No, I might have to
Yeah.
try that with one of my Sri Lankan pythons.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
That would be interesting. Now, do you think that the Argentine boa is the smartest of all the boas? Because I think the answer is yes.
I mean, I'd say that I don't have any evidence that it's not, but I would also have to say that um, it's really hard to tell. I mean, how do you gauge intelligence in a boa? It's
Yeah.
mostly, I would say, just by whether they look at out the cage and they're following, um, and they will sometimes. So that yeah, that would be yes. Um, by activity, if they move around more, you're going to think it's more intelligent. But then
Mm,
it's like for example, the Pearl Island boas. They're the most active boa I've worked with. Um, they're possibly one of the smartest. They move around a lot more. But is that just because of their habits? Because they've evolved to hunt birds and trees. Well,
mm,
that's why they have that elongated body. But does that also affect their intelligence? It may well. Is a boa that just sits still and is an ambush predator and just lies like a rock until food comes right up? Is that not as smart? I don't know. I mean, that would be like some of the boas in general that are thicker around, like the Bolivian Amarali and maybe some of the red tails. They tend to be more ambush, maybe a little bit less arboreal in general.
yeah.
um, Argentine boas are actually kind of midway. Like they're not as elongated as a Pearl Island, but it's more elongated than like a Amarali. So I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know if there is a relationship between the body shape and the intelligence. Some people have told me they think that Bolivian boas are the smartest, and those are one of the stockiest. So it's an interesting question.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I would have to say out of all my snakes that I feel that, and again, it's going
If,
off of emotion,
Mhm.
right? Is that the vibe I'm getting is that Nagini, my big Argentine boa, is the most intelligent one
Oh, really?
because,
Even
yeah, because
even compared to your pythons?
Yeah, because I think it's just the way that she interacts with me is that if
Mhm.
I'm working in this room on my computer, I'll hear her push on the glass, not pushing belligerent to get out of the cage, not like
Mhm.
just to the point of destroying her own face.
Mhm.
She'll push her nose up against the glass, make it shift and make a noise, and then just kind of wait for me to come and open the door, and then she'll come out and do stuff, right? So it's almost
Mhm.
like maybe I've conditioned her to do this over the years. She knows that, hey,
Yeah.
if I go up, if I bump into the glass, he opens the door and I get to go and hang out in the storage area underneath
Yeah.
my cage.
Yeah.
So
Certainly seems feasible. And so
but
with
it's still a learned behavior, right? She's learning, she's aware that that action is going to get a reaction from me when I'm present in the room.
yeah, and I would say that she probably also can associate you with food, and um, maybe to the point like some boas just go absolutely berserk when you're feeding.
Yeah.
Like even if they're not getting fed, they can like smell it in the air, and they're like striking against the glass, and um, although unfortunately, that doesn't happen very common. But some boas just kind of go berserk, and like if you stuck your hand in, you'd get bitten, right? Even if there's no food.
I've had that happen.
Yeah. Other boas, though, seem a lot more aware, and they almost seem more patient, like they're going to wait their turn. And you open up the enclosure and you present the food. And so in some cases, they just grab it and they just eat it, right? So
Yeah.
you got to wonder: do these animals they know the process of feeding, and they can anticipate that they're going to get fed, and there's no point going berserk because they're going to get fed, right? I mean, maybe they are, and yeah, no, interesting question. And I was going to ask you, so you're comparing, you have what, carpets, you have, you don't have a retic or berm, right? Because you can't have
I
those.
don't,
Okay.
but I have Timor pythons. So
Oh,
I do
team.
have,
Yeah.
yeah,
Those
I
are
do
smart,
have,
right? The Timors. It's like a
uh, they're very nervous. I mean, I guess from a self-preservation standpoint, you could definitely say that they're smart. They're very terrified of me. They're not smart enough to learn that I'm not going to eat them yet.
okay.
Because they musk, man. They dump urates every
Um,
time I touch them.
yeah, I guess if something is not relaxed enough, if this, in captivity, it's going to be kind of hard to see how smart it really is because they got to kind of let their guard down. I mean, that might be part
Yeah.
of it. But my Sri Lankans, I got 8-foot cages for them about a year ago and moved them into those cages and the sliding glass front. And then like an idiot, I left the cage open a crack once,
Uh-oh.
right? Like I was, changing the water or something, put it back, and I forgot to slide it all the way, even though they got locks, like I didn't engage the lock. And I went to work, and then I get this call at work that oh, Brian, your snake's out. Your snake's out. I'm like, oh crap. I'm like, can you take a picture of it? And they took the picture. It was the Sri Lankan, right? So I live, pretty far from my day job, so I couldn't just go home at that instant. I told them to, put a box over it. I didn't want my daughter trying to pick it up. God forbid she gets bitten, right? Even though it's
Yeah.
unlikely.
How old is your daughter?
15.
Okay.
I think she was 14 at the time. But anyway, I went home a few hours later, went right to the snake room. I'm like, I got to get the snake, right? And I'm looking everywhere, I'm looking at all the likely spots where a snake might go, not there. I look under everything, not there. I looked around for about 15 minutes. The snake had gone right back to the cage, right? So the
Oh wow.
snake knew that it had gotten out and it was checking stuff out. And maybe, I don't know if it was, I don't think it was like escaping to escape because the snakes are clearly, they want to go to the cage because when I put them back, they wanted to go there, you know. But this particular python had gotten out, and I don't know if he was getting out just out of curiosity, but he knew exactly where to go back, right?
Mm.
And it's the only time I've ever had a snake escape and then go back on its own. So that implies that this snake is really aware of its surroundings. And yeah, no, incidentally, a tip that I give people is, does your snake want to be in the cage? Like, if your snake is trying to get out of the cage, you probably need to change your cage, right? Because the snake is not comfortable. If the snake
Mm.
is comfortable in the cage, it's not going to try to get out unless it's hungry or unless it's got a need that needs to be met. So with these particular pythons, they like the cage. It's, they got plenty of space and they're comfortable in there. They want to go back. It's like, you go out for the day and you do whatever, but then you come back home, you're the most comfortable in your own room, in your own bed, right? So these snakes want to go back to where they're comfortable. And yeah, I mean, that's yet another thing that shows to me that the snake really has a lot going on in its head. But,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is interesting. Their level of interest on occasion of what is going on outside the cage, and then sometimes it's the opposite where there's just no interest at all. They're just not. They don't care.
yeah,
So
they
it
just
makes
kind
you
of lie
wonder
there.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what kind of drives that difference in the indifference in that. So I've noticed that with myself, actually waking up in the middle of the night at like 3 or 4 a.m. and kind of like having an idea. It's so weird the way that works. Like that kind of being in a dream state, but then
Mm,
waking up with an idea. And like sometimes it just feels like such a perfect,
yeah,
simple solution, right?
yeah, and
It's such a
sometimes it is.
yeah. I think that's how I
Mhm.
decided to start the podcast. Was I was like
Mhm.
obsessing over something, and I just woke up and I'm like, I should do my own podcast, and
Yeah,
it's weird, like a
you know,
life altering decision like that.
it's cool you bring up the topic of dreams because I've noticed that too. Like sometimes these things happen in a dream state, and it's you arrive at these ideas in a way that's completely different from how your brain works during the waking state. And um, the thing that you need to do, though, of course, you have to write it down at the time because you can't remember any of this stuff. It's like with dreams. Like most people are having, 4 or 5 dreams a night, but they rarely remember anything.
Hmm.
And because we have these built-in dream erasers that erase all the ideas. I used to, when I was around your age, I was more into, or maybe even a little younger, like in my 20s, I was more into the dreams, and I was at one point I was writing them all down, and I started to have like more and more, and they would get like more and more complicated and rich. But I got like a lot of ideas that I would write down, and I've had several times where I have this idea in a dream and I write it down, and at the time it seems like a great idea, but it's just when I think about it later, it's just ridiculous. But then I have had things that it was a great idea. It was just a different way of seeing the problem. What
Yeah.
else is interesting? I don't know if you've noticed falling asleep. A lot of times you don't just fall right asleep, or at least I don't. You go through this this state. I think it's called hypnagogic, where you have this, like your thoughts get less and less organized and kind of more and more random, and you have like all these weird associations happening that you might not have when you're thinking more rationally.
Yeah.
But when people do that, that's another way that you can unlock like hidden associations and hidden ideas. But I think there have been a lot of people that have done this, and they've come up with these great scientific answers to scientific problems. So it's definitely a lot more than just this linear, rational way to breed boas or to do anything that involves any kind of science.
Hmm. How do you decide what you're going to pair for the year? Is it
Mm-hmm.
is it again an emotional thing? Is it based off of how many babies you have left over from the prior season, or what's
Mm-hmm.
selling really
Mm-hmm.
well? Like, how do you make that determination?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So as far as like what specific projects I'm going to work on, I try to pick things that are going to be more likely to sell because there's a lot. When um, not quite so much with boas, but there are a lot of unwanted reptiles on the market now, especially with certain types, and a lot of people they got into them um, just kind of bred more indiscriminately, and it's a pyramid scheme. A lot of people back when the pandemic started, they thought they were going to be a millionaire breeding ball pythons, and they believed it. And we all know it doesn't work that way. But as far as like specific, like with my Surinams, I'll typically have about a half a dozen or so pairs a year. But I want to pair up animals that I think are going to complement each other, and that I think have characteristics that are going to combine in really good, cool new ways in the offspring. And I pair up whenever possible unrelated animals, and I have several different bloodlines of the Suriname, so I can do that with those animals. With some of the other animals, like for example the Tarahumara and the Croaky, unfortunately, as we know, the captive gene pool isn't really that big, and there's not as much as far as variability. I think with like the Croaky, like some of them are more striped and some of them are more like, the regular saddle pattern. And some of them are kind of more lighter in color. Some of them have like this really nice steel blue color that I like a lot. And then freckling, like I have some that have this really nice freckling. So that's, something I consider. I don't have nearly as many pairs each year with the Surinames. Most of the other projects, I have a pair or two that might go in each year. But yeah, you do have to consider what sold the previous year and whether you should breed something if it doesn't sell. And my rule of thumb is that you should have about a year. By the time that you're having the babies from the following year, you should have sold most of the ones from the previous year. I mean, they're not going to, people have this idea they can just like have a litter of boas and then they're off to the ATM or something. It doesn't work like that. You have to put in the time to get them established. You have to put in the time to market them, to get them out. If your boas are selling within, very, very fast, either you have really, really great boas that are really in demand, or maybe the prices are too low. Or, in some cases, maybe they would sell better if you set the price a little bit higher, but that's a whole separate, discussion. But my point is, it takes time to sell the boas, right? It's not this instant thing. You're going to have to put in a year, plan on keeping them for a year. I will, I still have a couple animals from 2024, a few morph boas. And these are just animals that just got overlooked. They're not holdbacks. I'm not planning on holding them back. And this, like, for example, I didn't breed. I had a litter that, I think these were from Moran Hypo Jungle. I had some, they were just like Hypo Jungles. And Hypo Jungle is a cool morph. Unfortunately, it's something, both of those genes have been around a long time. People don't really appreciate them. The market value isn't that much higher than just the normal boa. I think, stuff like that just gets overlooked. So I try to stay away from producing that. I know IMG is hot. IMG, that's like the gene that everyone loves, right? And what's strange about IMG is it's an incomplete dominant, which means that if you have one IMG, you breed it to any other boa, you're going to get 50% IMGs, right? So you would think that it would be less common. Or did I do that right? Maybe it's 25%. Yeah, if it's only got
I know
one
it's
copy,
a lot. Because I've used that.
I did it wrong in my head. It's 25 because if one boa has no copies, unless of course the boa has two copies of IMG, they've been saying there might be a super IMG, but I think IMG is dominant anyway, which means there's no super form. So basically you have one copy, you're going to have the phenotype. You're not necessarily going to be any darker, but who knows? Maybe if you have two copies, it'll be darker. And
that's fatal, isn't it? If you pair two IMGs, I've heard that it's fatal.
That's a good question. I've never tried it. I'll look into
I wouldn't. That. Yeah, let me pull that up.
I know a lot. Well, a lot of these supers, like the Motley and the Jungle, is obviously not good to pair together.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, no, I didn't hear. Okay, that's new. But anyway,
I'll pull
I, I
that
think
up
it
right
is
now.
just it's just a dominant trait. So there's not really a super form, but then I've
Okay.
seen some people do claim that it's incomplete dominant. I mean, it's not with boa genetics, with human genetics. We have the human genome, we have all the genes figured out. I mean, like Warren Booth could tell you all this stuff much better than me, but we have it all mapped out, right? The boa,
Yeah.
we have a genome, but we don't have it like annotated, right? So we don't know exactly where all these genes are, and like for example, nobody knows exactly what as far as I know, no one knows exactly the mutation that led to the Kyle albino, like the exact like nucleotide sequence that changed in the DNA. I don't think
Yeah.
anyone's figured that out. I know there was a paper on corn snakes. I think it was the albino corn snake or some corn snake morph. They'd actually mapped it and they knew exactly like where it was in the corn snake DNA. At the same level like we have for certain diseases that are genetically caused in the human genome. But with boas, we don't have that. We don't have a lot of money. People aren't dumping billions of dollars into doing boa gene research like they are with humans, because with humans we have diseases we want to treat. So obviously we're going to spend all kinds of money on this. Nobody really cares that much about boas other than boa people, right? And they're not gonna. There's not the money, the funding to do boa research, unless it's like somehow related to humans. So that's one of the limitations. And like for example, the sharp albino is supposedly a T negative, like the call, but nobody really knows for sure. And the VPIT positives, the caramel albinos, which are one of my favorites, is supposedly a tyrosinase positive, but we don't know for sure from boas specifically. Like it's known that there's other types of snakes. I think it's like a rat snake that has a T positive, that they've looked at the levels of tyrosinase and they've determined that it's because of that. And they've
Hmm.
kind of shown that there's different types of albinos genetically. But as far as I know, no one's done that with boas. So we're kind of inferring all this stuff from the appearance of the boa and from the genetics from the breeding.
Okay, I wanna correct myself. I think I was thinking of Motley to Motley.
Okay.
From what I'm seeing here, it says yes, breeding two. Now this is an AI overview. Keep that in mind.
Okay.
Yes, breeding two IMG boas together is considered safe and does not produce known health issues in the offspring.
Okay. That's what I thought.
But I
And
mean,
you're right. With the
take that with a
motley,
grain of salt.
it's interesting though. With the motley, it's not safe, but you get a really dark boa. It's called the super motley, and it dies after like a year or two. But with the IMG, I guess my question is, if you breed two IMGs together and you get a homozygote IMG, is it going to be darker? And you would think that it might be. However, if it's truly dominant, dominant traits, it's all or nothing, right? Like for example, blue eyes and brown eyes in humans, you either have like blue eyes or brown eyes, right? By blue,
Mhm.
it can be like green or like gray. You know, dark eyes are like black or brown, but it's all or nothing, right? So and I also know that that one IMG I was talking about that's really dark, that one I know only has one copy because her father is a moonglow who doesn't have IMG, right? So
Mhm.
she could only have inherited one copy from her mother. Her mother, I'm pretty sure, only has one copy also. Yeah, in fact, I know because not all the babies in the litter were IMG. If the mother had two copies, um, right? Yeah, all the babies would be have one copy. So, but this was a really dark boa.
Yeah.
The and then the siblings in that same litter. Like I said, I have a moonglow, a ghost, and an anery. The moonglow obviously is hard to tell because this one is lacking all melanin, but the ghost and the anery, they're getting dark, but they're not quite as dark as that straight IMG. So I don't know if that's because the other genes, like certainly the hypo you would think might affect the darkness in the ghost, but even the anery isn't as dark. So maybe it's just individual variability. Um, and then I also bring this up because I have another IMG boa from I was going to say unrelated, but technically they're all related because they're all IMG. But it's from another boa that's um, less closely related than than, so I'll say unrelated for lack of a better word. This is another IMG. This is another hypo IMG female who's not nearly as dark as the mother of the dark one. And she had a litter also, and those animals aren't getting as dark. Some of them are hypo jungles though. And I think the jungle and the hypo make the IMG less dark.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it'd be interesting. And, I really like IMG. It seems to be very popular, even though it's technically one of the easiest genes to breed because it's co-dominant and you only need one, or not it's incomplete dominant. You only need one animal, right? So you would think that the value would drop much faster, but the value hasn't. It's one of the few genes which has really held its value. But do you have an IMG?
I do.
Okay.
I don't have.
Is it a
very
straight
many,
IMG or is it?
It's IMG Motley, and I think it's Parahet for some kind of albinism.
Yeah, the Parahet thing is weird. Yeah, that's
it is
whole topic. But yeah, is he really dark or is it?
Oh, dude, he's black.
I think I've seen
he's black.
I saw your social media posts of it on.
Anytime I post him, he gets like 100,000 views.
Yeah, that's right. I've seen that snake. How old is that snake?
How old is he? I think he's at 23.
Okay.
So yeah,
so not
and
3 years.
Yeah, no, he's not that old. But he's IMG and Motley, and man, what a combo that is.
Motley, yeah, that's a real. I don't have any Motley boas. I kind of wish I had gotten one or gotten, that the gene into my collection so I could breed it with the IMGs.
They're beautiful. Motley, even just by itself, Motley is a really beautiful gene. I think it's kind of underrated, even just on its own. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, I think single gene animals are underrated. People want all these combos. I have just a hypo. It's a hypo. It's hat for VPI. It was from my VPI IMG litter, I think, and it's a really nice animal. It's just so light. And the other thing is when you have just one gene, it's immediately obvious what the gene does. It makes the genetics easier. I mean, when you have like these combos you pair together, it's so unclear what all the babies are. Sometimes people are just guessing. And I see people on Morph Market that they label it as one thing where they should be saying it's a possible. Like, for example, jungle. That gene, it can be very, very difficult to tell for sure in many cases, especially when you combine it with all these other things. I think they are coming out with, or they recently came out with shed tests for different genes. And I know they had it for ball pythons before, but I think they just recently came out with it for boas, or they are going to come out soon, I think.
When do you think I'm going to be able to breed my Argentines? Because I mean, my girl is coming up on 5, so she's probably getting
pretty soon. Yeah, you have a male too.
I have a male, but he's a 24, so he's just a wee baby.
Okay. Well, when my original attempts to breed the Argentines, my original pair, I think I was breeding them in the early 2000s. So they were probably 3 or 4 at the time, and that didn't succeed. And then I ended up having 2 litters from them in 05 and 07. So at the time they were 8 to 10 years old, I think.
Wow.
And then unfortunately, I didn't have any litters for a while. And then, I had kids and I was kind of out of boa breeding for a while. And then I got back into it. And I had one more litter from that originally pair in 2015. And then I held some of those back. And then I got some more animals, including a Max Pink that I added to my group. And then I had, I was really psyched to get back into breeding Argentines. And I think I had like a year or two where I wasn't successful, like maybe 21 and 22. And then 23 and 24, I had litters from 2 different females. And then I didn't pair them up in 25. And then I'm hoping for a litter this year. But I would say, like most locality boas, ideally 5 for a female, or at least 4 for a male.
Yeah.
I know I still, people say they breed morph boas. I've heard people claim it's young as like under 2 years for a male. in
I've
like
heard that.
3 years for a female. Yeah, I don't think, I mean, my males at that age they still look like babies. I
Yeah.
think the youngest I've tried to pair a male has been about 3. And, males certainly don't need to be as old, but they seem to be not as interested. Like, I think, if I remember correctly, I paired out my Moonglow male with a female when he was 3, and it was not successful. And then I paired him up with the IMG either the following year or the year after, and he was successful. And
Mm.
he had put on some body size at the time, and pretty much reached his adult size. So I think it's also, I mean, it is the age, but it is also the size. And with females, it's certainly more worrisome because if the female's too small and she has issues delivering the babies, it could lead to a lot of problems, including the death of the female. So it's a little bit more critical for females.
Yeah, that's my big fear, because I'm really connected to this animal. But I also I selfishly want to reproduce them, but at the same time, I also want to give her I want to let her have that experience if she wants to have the experience. I mean, that's what all animals are driven to do, is to reproduce and pass on their genes. So it.
You mean like they wanted like a sex drive for boas? Is that what you're?
Well, I mean, every animal is inclined to reproduce, right? That's
Yeah,
the only reason.
I wonder about that though with the boas because I mean the males certainly they're like I said before, they have behaviors that would indicate like, and they stop feeding in the fall and maybe get a little more active. I wonder that about the females though, because um like the females, they'll just continue eating. And I don't think it's, like some people say like they have pet cats and they don't want to neuter their cat, but then they got to let it out and it's got to like,
Oh, that's
express its
crazy.
sexual instincts. And, we know what that leads to. But
Yeah.
I don't think a boa would necessarily be like unhappy or live less of a life if it didn't reproduce. And
Mm.
I also bring it up because people don't realize that it does limit their lifespan. I mean, when you breed a boa, it's not likely to live as long, and it's much more chance it's going to have issues. So,
Mm.
um, and that's like people have asked me many times about my Sri Lankan pythons. Am I going to breed those? And I say probably not because I don't want to. They're more like they're pets, and I really bond with them. And um, yeah, I mean, if something happened with the female and she became egg bound, that's my one shot. I mean, it took me almost half a century to get my first pair, and it's not like you can go to your local Walmart and pick up a pair of Sri Lankan pythons.
Yeah.
So this might be my
That
only
I
one.
actually had that written down if you were going to breed those.
Oh yeah, well I can't say conclusively not, but I'm not planning on it anytime soon. Put it that way.
Yeah.
I thought they would get bigger because they're now pushing 3 years old, and the male still he's about 6.5 feet maybe. The female's about 8, and they seem to have not gained any weight in the last few months. Even though I mean they didn't eat for about a month and a half over the winter, but they seem to have stayed about the same weight.
Mm.
So I don't know if they've plateaued. Like I thought I have an Indian python that's about 12 or 13 feet. So I thought they'd get to be about that. But
Whoa.
maybe they won't. Maybe they won't get any bigger.
That's a
Which
big ass Indian python.
yeah, it's a big, yeah, bigger than I thought it would get. But it's also over 20 years old. So
Wow.
yeah.
Man. Hey, what you mentioned before getting some 8-foot cages for your Sri Lankans.
Mhm.
What is like, do you build your own cages or
No,
like what
these
company
were
do you
from
use?
Animal Plastics.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to, I'm not a spokesperson for cages or anything, but I really love those cages.
A
You
lot of
know,
people do. A lot of people do.
I gotta say that they're really really well built. I mean, I've gotten some other cages that are just sloppy, like the craftsmanship, and they fall apart and they don't fit right together. These ones are just like they're perfect. They're like the machining is perfect. Everything fits. They're very easy to assemble. They just screw together. I mean, you can assemble one in like an hour.
Yeah.
Um, they're inexpensive. I mean, they're much better deal than a lot of the cages. They last a long time. I've got some that I bought from my buddy, and he had used them for 5-6 years, and I've had them for I think like 10 years, and they still look great. There are other cages. I think part of the problem with a lot of the reptile industry is a lot of the stuff is like cottage industry. It's like a mom and pop shop making something. They think they can make money doing something, and it looks good on paper, but then they try to scale it up and it doesn't work, and they can't really produce something for a cost that people could afford. I mean, when you go to like IKEA or Walmart or something, they've made these things millions and millions of times, right? IKEA, for every they've probably made like billions of coffee tables. So they've got like the science of cheap coffee tables down perfect, right? So it all fits together. It's the lowest possible price. You can't expect that from somebody working in his garage to have that level of efficiency, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the reptile products aren't not necessarily bad. They're just kind of like the fit and finish isn't ideal, and maybe it looks kind of antiquated. It works, but with the animal plastics, I got to say that the fit and finish is great. I mean, it's as good as IKEA, and I'm not vouching for IKEA, by the way. But
IKEA is fun to walk around.
Yeah, and I like their cinnamon buns as well, I gotta say.
And the Swedish meatballs, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, the balls, yeah. But one thing with the animal plastics, it's a thicker plastic, which is great because it lasts longer, it doesn't sag. But it also means when you're heating from below, it can be a little bit more challenging. If you want to heat from below, you either have to turn the thermostat much higher, or you have to design something like what my buddy did with the cages he sold me is he cut out a piece and he put glass in. So you can put the heat mat right under the glass, and that works much better. Although it, involves, having to modify that. But fortunately for like my big cages, I just use radiant heat panels.
Yeah.
It works fine. But yeah, I really like those cages. I mean, there are other good cages out there, but the downside, I think they had the lead time was pretty long. It was, I think it got out to several months back during the pandemic. I think they scaled things up though.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can't wait a few months for your cage. I mean, order the cage before you need it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have a shipment of cages coming in. I'm pretty excited. I have four 4x2 by 20-inch tall enclosures for my blood pythons.
Okay.
And then I
have animal plastics?
No, it's from my buddy at Maze Exotics, Mike.
Okay.
Shout out to Mike. He's really good at what he does.
I have to check it out.
Yeah, it's he doesn't have a website, I don't think. He is on Facebook. He does local shows. He does Daytona. I know he killed it this last Daytona. So if anybody is going to Daytona this year and you're in like driving distance and you need a cage, like it's a good opportunity to grab one from him, or even see if you could have him custom build one and then pick it up at the show. But he built these 6x2x2s right here, and they're fantastic. He did my Australian wall, which is 11 feet of cages.
Cool.
And now he's working on
HDPE.
It's PVC. Yeah. Black PVC.
Well, I think animal plastics is PVC.
Yep. And, so yeah, but he's making Nagini's kind of forever cage. It's going to be 8 foot by 2 foot by 2.5 foot tall.
Mm-hmm.
And,
I got from the ones I got from AP are the same, except they're 2.5 feet deep and 2 feet tall by 8 feet.
Yeah, that is nice. I bet having that extra depth is good for a boa to be able to kind of sprawl.
But the height to climb, it's a trade-off. They can get more climbing space.
Oh yeah, I'm going to be decking it out with oak logs and branches and stuff for her to scale on. But yeah, man, it's a lot of fun getting new cages. At some point I'd like to actually have a building on site. That would be ideal.
Yeah, like an outbuilding.
Yeah. Like have a metal building built. I don't know. I've gone back and forth. I initially wanted like a turnkey shed delivered, but with the way that my city is with their
So,
inspections
yeah.
and permitting and all that, it seems like I couldn't have that done. So I'm gonna need. I think the easy thing to do. Everybody in my neighborhood has these damn metal buildings going up. If you have a half acre, so I'm thinking that that's probably the way to go, is to just have the slab poured, put the metal building in, have somebody come in, frame out rooms, and just kind of go through the drudgery of that process.
Mhm. It'll pay off in the long run, though. Because
Yeah.
you can't beat having a separate building. I'm not fortunate. Unfortunately, I don't have a separate building, so um, and it's not really feasible for me. But having the separate building and setting it up from the ground up rather than just kind of adapting as you go along is definitely a better way. A lot of boa people or a lot of reptile people, they start out small and then they build up, but they don't have like this kind of unified approach from the beginning where they get the same cages, they got everything if perfect because you don't know what you want to get until already you get it, and at that point you already have all the stuff. So, but I had a few other types of cages before, but now it's all AP. And again, I'm not.
Yeah.
This isn't an endorsement for animal plastics since I'm not paying
Yeah.
for them.
Now your racks and everything, you build those yourself?
Yeah, I build them, um, and racks are pretty easy to build. Um, you don't need a lot of construction of carpentry experience, or you don't need a lot of sophisticated tools. The fit and finish doesn't have to be as good as like with a cage. And you can also custom design based on different types of tubs. Like I've got ones with the 30 by 40 foot or inch boa tubs. I've got smaller ones for the babies and for subadults. Um, yeah, I've tried a lot of different ones.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that definitely helps being able to build your own stuff. It helps to be handy in this hobby, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So what like what are you excited about kind of going into this season, having kind of already gone through your cycling and everything? I know that you're sort of a secretive guy when it comes to your reproduction of boas, but
Well, I mean, I'm just, at this point, I got to a point where I've pretty much have experience breeding everything that I'm breeding at this, like before I had like projects that I had never bred yet. And it was always like, oh, maybe this will be the year that I finally breed them. Some of them I got out of. I have focused more, like for example, with the true red tails, I only have the Venezuelan and the Suriname at this point. I've let the other ones go. Um, and I've grown those projects from holdbacks. So I'm excited about like just taking things into more and more generations and seeing what the babies are going to look like and seeing how bringing different bloodlines together is going to hopefully have, the best of each in both the best of both in each, in the babies. So they,
yeah.
basically just taking it to the next generation. Um, I'm still like the morphs. I got into morphs much later, and the morphs, of course, are much less. I think I've just got a couple pairs of morphs this year, but I'm always interested in seeing what the babies are going to look like because you get just this with a locality boa, all the babies are basically the same type, right? But with a morph boa, when you have multiple genes, you can have all kinds of different stuff and it just looking at how the different genes manifest in combination with other ones, they can do it in like all different ways. And like you might think that like a moran hypo jungle looks one way, but there's like a whole bunch of different possibilities of how that combination can look. And if I remember correctly, I had like 4 or 5 moran hypo jungles from I had a moran hypo with a cross with a moran jungle.
Hmm.
And like, and I initially I had like, I think I was keeping three of them. Three of them were earmarked as holdbacks. And then I soon realized I needed to let one of those go. And that was a few months later. And then I just let one go that's going to be shipped out soon to her new owner. So hope maybe the new owner might be actually watching. But this is a beautiful animal, and really I reluctantly let this one go. But it's like I said, like you have a list, and it's like there's only certain numbers of animals, and you got to let these holdbacks that you would have held back go.
Yeah.
So, but my point is that each of these manifested in a different way. And like the one that I'm letting go was kind of, it had this really cool combination between striping and like aberrant saddles and connected, and really killer animal. And I'm pretty sure that the home she's going to will be top notch, though, based on my conversations with the new owner. So, but I've got this one remaining that's just blows me away. It's got this really cool geometric pattern of saddles. Like
Mm.
sometimes the jungle gene makes the saddles go in like these squares with like a perfect center, and like they're joined together, and like these really like almost uh, like these shapes, but it's sometimes the shapes are kind of more random. But the shapes look almost like writing, almost like hieroglyphics or something like this. It's really cool look. So I've got
Wow.
this one animal, but my point is that all of these animals had the same genes, but just some of them they just expressed it in a different way. So that's um, one of the cool things with the morph boas. And I know that my channel is largely locality boas, and that's really what my foundation was. Um, I know that there's kind of this a little bit of a schism between locality and morph side, and sometimes you have people that might not really like the other one. I think it's more so the locality people, to the morph.
Sure, they're
Um,
snobs.
but yeah, honestly though, I don't really deal with a lot of straight morph people. Most of the like 90% of the people I interact with are locality boa people
Yeah.
because I don't go to shows. I'm just interacting on, social media and online and, with the few people I meet in person. Um, so I'm really not really that hooked up with the morph community as much, even though I do it. Um, but yeah, I just I think there's a lot of pluses to both of those, both morph and locality boas. Um, I think it's great with the localities that we have kind of the more natural history, the more like the nature side, and we want to keep them as pure as possible, and we want to perpetuate the wild look. However, I also realize that that's basically impossible unless there's going to be imports brought in, which unfortunately doesn't look like it's going to happen. So, I've one idea that I always thought is that locality boa projects are eventually just going to become like morph boa projects because they've already been changed so much both by conscious selection of the breeder and unconscious selection by captivity itself. There's nothing we can do to control this. Um,
Mm.
it's just a little bit naive. You see some of these locality purists that are like, um, I see some of these debates on social media that sometimes get nasty, and someone is going nuts about how, supposedly this boa that was imported, we don't know 100% that it came from exactly this point, and this person was saying that it does. It's just stupidity. It's like, really, this is what you're going to be focusing your energy on?
Mm.
I mean, I've always said the only way to know 100% that the boa is from that locality is to collect it yourself, right? Which is, of course, impossible. So we got to just go with the records we have and the how much the credibility of the breeders. But unfortunately, even with all that being 100% accurate, at some point, I mean, 10 generations, 15 generations, at what point does a boa just cease to be a wild animal? I mean, it's
Yeah.
something that there's not an easy answer. And of course, if somehow, countries in South America decide, okay, we're going to let out a quota of, 5,000 boas every year to be, for pets in the US, maybe the situation will change. But I also think that a lot of what people are calling locality boas may be shaped by what they think it's supposed to look like. And even though it's not impure, it's actually from that locality. They've just kind of accentuated what they think. Like maybe they think a Guyana boa has like more purples and they want to accentuate that, you know? So yeah, it's, there's not really any easy answers to a lot of these questions. With the morph boas, because they don't care about the locality. I mean, that seems like terrible for locality people. However, it's like when you get a dog or cat, it's a domestic animal. You're not thinking, well, where was the wolf that my dog is descended from, collected from? You don't care, it's just, it's a domestic animal. And that's, I mean, obviously, wolves or dogs have been kept for tens of thousands of years, whereas with boas, we're looking at 50 years of morph breeding.
Yeah.
It's not even that, right? So, but it's amazing how fast, like the diversity of boas, like in the last 20 to 30 years, like how many new types and how the different genes have been recombined. And so, yeah, I don't think it's that much of a stretch to think that even in another 50 years, it might be something, much more domesticated, for lack of a better word. And the other thing with domestic animals, a lot of like things like domestic rats and mice and hamsters, those aren't that appreciably different from the wild animals that they're descended from. I mean, you could take a laboratory rat, you could breed it with a wild Norway rat, the same species. I don't think you could do that with your wolf and a dog, right?
People do it though.
Oh yeah, actually, you're right. You can. I take that back.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not a Chihuahua, but there's certain dog breeds.
Definitely not a Chihuahua. Yeah, like if you were to take a male wolf and a female Chihuahua, like that is going to be, right? that wolf is just going to eat breakfast and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the same with cats. I mean, the domestic cats are apparently able to reproduce with the Eurasian.
Yeah.
That they're
Yeah, they do those Savannah where they take a tabby and they breed it to a serval, I think is the Savannah.
Serval, that's a whole separate species, I think, isn't it? A serval, that's like from Africa with those tough.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, no, but this is like the point. I mean, the definition of a species is nowhere near as clear as you might think it is. And, the traditional definition is, two animals that can interbreed as a species. But we all know that definition doesn't really work very well in actual practice because there's lots of not just different species that can crossbreed, but even different genera that can crossbreed, like a corn snake and a king snake.
Yeah, isn't that wild? I mean, because you look at the human genome and it's like, well, how come there's no primates that we could, hybridize with? Because we already did it until those other primates disappeared. And so you've got like however many different primates in your genome already.
If I remember correctly, a chimpanzee has 48 chromosomes, whereas a human has 46. So it's like a horse and a donkey. You get a mule, which has an odd number of chromosomes. So I guess if a human and a chimp, did produce a baby, it would not be viable. Not that I'm suggesting that anyone try that, but I know that there have been several apparent attempts to do that. Going like in the Soviet Union, there was some kind of really bizarre experiment that was going on.
That's really gross.
Yeah, these are the types of TV shows I watch. But yeah, but where what a species is unclear. Where domestication starts is unclear. I mean, so I think with boas, I think we can expect that they're, I don't even know. I mean, maybe if more things start popping up in captivity, it seems like with morph boas, it seems like there was a lot of different traits that became available, like between the call albino in the early 90s, going out to like the teens-ish. It seems like there are not a lot of new ones coming out. I know that like people have been looking for a piebald boa, and some people claim that they have it. but it seems like a lot of stuff came out in like the early 2000s and teens, and then people really started to combine them together into the different combo morphs.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. But yeah, I would think that in the future there's going to be more diversity in terms of morphs, and I would say that with the localities, hopefully we'll have a situation where more wild caught animals become available, and maybe we even get animals coming from places that we were didn't have boas previously in the captive gene pool, and we have new locality boas.
Yeah.
On some of these islands, for example.
All right, man. You ready to wrap it up? We've been talking for over 3 hours.
Yeah.
Jeez
Well,
Louise, Brian.
yeah. Well, it's been a interesting conversation.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise. And best of luck with your Argentines and all your other projects. And
Yeah, we got to get the Boa Symposium 2 put together here.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It is. We joke that it is the most rescheduled podcast in the history of podcasts, which I think has to be true at this point in time. It's kind of comical. Every time we're coming up on it to record it, I'm like, hey, it's Thursday. I feel really good. Let's see what happens. And then by Saturday, I either have a flu or a stomach bug. You've been sick. Warren's had funerals to attend, and he's a very busy guy. And but yeah, it's gonna happen. It's in the works. It's on the books.
We need to get some more boa people. And
I do.
maybe you can
I'm talking with Ace Boas right now.
Okay, yeah,
to
he's
get
Dennis. Yeah, he'll be good.
yeah.
You,
So
you had
I'm
the other Lisa on. You had the two Lisas on.
Yep.
That's good.
I had
Yeah,
both
hopefully
the
you can
Lisas.
get Vin Russo on. That would be really good.
Yes. Yeah. I want to get Vin on. I have talked to him. I think he'll be coming on eventually. And who else?
It'd be good
Michael
if you could
Beach.
get Michael Beach. Yeah, that's who I was thinking. And he's kind of more old school. Like he's kind of like more secret. He may not want to do like a podcast. I can talk next time I talk to him. I can ask him.
You've reminded me as soon as you said his name before, I remembered that I had hit him up and he was like, "No, I don't do that kind of thing.
Oh, you did.
I don't want
Maybe
my
I can
picture
talk
out there
to
on
him.
the internet."
Yeah.
And then like maybe 2 hours later, he's like, I talked to some friends and they actually told me I should do this. So I think I'd like to come on.
Oh, he did? Okay.
Yeah.
No, just
So
tell him. I mean, if he watches a few of your podcasts, he'll get a good feeling. And you know who Allison Theus? That's another boa breeder. Sonia Colmu, I think her name is, or his name.
okay.
Matthew Blackburn. He's a boa breeder.
Yep.
He's also in Florida. He'd be good.
Yep.
Yeah, I had a bunch of people. I'm blanking. Anyway.
Yeah, well, we'll get. I agree. I mean, I love boas. I love talking to boa folks. And it's always great getting you on. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate you, man. I remember reaching out to you for the first time, being like, "It's Brian Boas. He's never going to come on my show," and yet here we are. You're back. This is your third time. So.
No, it's a lot of fun, and like I said, I really enjoy hearing from different people because with your podcast, I never know like what to expect in most of the people I hadn't heard of before, and they all come from different backgrounds and they're doing different things. But I always get like different perspectives on, the boa keeping or reptile keeping, which is always really great. So
yeah,
I'm in a boa bubble, so you kind of get me out of that bubble.
Did you listen to Glenn's episode?
No, I have to. There's a bunch of episodes that you've done recently. I haven't had a chance to because I haven't been commuting as much lately. I've been doing some traveling but yeah,
nice.
there's a bunch of episodes I gotta get caught up on.
Yeah, I think you'll like Glenn's episode because he works with. Well, he's a California guy. So, you guys. I love talking to you, California folks, and he's
the guy talking about looking for rainbow or rosy boas in the canyon.
Glenn Brooks. Glenn Brooks.
Okay. You had
I
one
think
guy
you,
on from Southern California. I'm blanking on his name.
Stephen Richardson. Is
Yeah,
that who you're thinking of?
maybe that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the other guy with Tara Boas. There's like
Yeah, because I remember that. He was talking about him. Yeah.
yeah, he's got an insane collection of Tara Boas.
Oh, really? Does he have
Yeah,
different? I mean, does he? Because, like I said, as far as I know, they're all basically.
they're all related. Yeah, they're all from the same genetic pool, but
Yeah,
I think he's just collecting different phenotypes,
okay. Yeah, I
like
mean, there is maybe there's different ones that I don't know if they're like. It's probably not new mutations popping up in captivity, but it's definitely different manifestations of the original gene pool.
yeah, he definitely has like lighter ones and darker ones and
Mhm.
less pattern and but he's got a ton of them, man. He's got to
Mhm.
have like I don't know, 6.6 or something like that. He's got a
Mhm.
lot.
Yeah.
But all right, man. Well, I
All right. Well,
appreciate
it's been
you.
a pleasure, and keep this up. It's been great. You're really contributing a lot to the herp world, and this will be a great resource for people to look back on decades from now. All these podcasts. So, thank you for
Thank you,
doing what you're
Brian.
doing.
And thank you for you doing what you're doing with your
Yeah.
awesome YouTube videos.
Cool. Thanks. Well, it's been great. Have a great day, and until next time.